Hi, Kate, can you hear me? I'm having connectivity issues.
Hi, I'm glad you are joining us. And Steve is having troubles too. So
Yeah,
there's something going on. So I'm working with Steve here.
it's something like the link doesn't go straight to it, so I just sat there trying to get in and I'm not sure. It doesn't look like do we have quorum? One, two, three,
I'm going to
four.
send the link to everyone just to make
Okay,
sure that if there's other people having
yeah,
challenges that they have this. So I'm going to do that right now.
okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure why it did that.
I just sent it out and
Okay.
hopefully Steve will be on in a second.
And it looks like there are one, two, three, four, five of us. And there's Steve.
Yes, hello. I
Hi,
just couldn't
Steve.
find the link for the
I
joining it.
I had the same thing.
Okay. Sorry, anyway, for being late.
So, Kate, do you want to call roll? I know that Rhea is not able to. Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, Rhea will not be with us this evening. She had a conflict, but I will start roll call now. We have Steve Carot,
Yes, here.
Rhea Ortner, Karina Luscher, Barb Hart,
Here?
Andrew Duart, Ron Mitchell, Danielle Kraus,
Here.
Steve Roundtree,
Here.
Jonathan Baumhover.
Here.
All right.
And Kate, it's Miranda. I would just, whoever is the call-in user will want to press *6 to unmute. So if that's a board member, I'd recommend you do so now so that Kate can acknowledge your attendance.
Okay. And Trustee Danforth also reached out. She was having trouble, so I just sent her the link as well.
Great. Do we want to just give it a couple seconds to see if anybody else pops in there?
Yeah, I'm hoping, because I am still getting text messages and emails, so hopefully we're getting everyone.
And I just text Andrew to remind him. Okay. But hopefully Andrew will be able to pop on. Let me close my doors so you can't hear my dogs. Okay. First, we have the consent agenda. Do we have any changes or questions about the consent agenda? Sorry, I'm still having connectivity issues.
I have to unshare for a moment. Ron just called me that he's having trouble too, so I'm going to forward this link on to him. And Kate, one thing I just realized is that at the top of the agenda, we don't have the meeting access information. That might help next time is if we copy and paste it.
Oh, I normally do. I must have, something
Yeah.
must have happened. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. I guess one thing I would tell the whole board is we're actually going to use the same meeting access information month after month. You should now have a rolling invite for every month. So that's the nice thing is that your link and your access information won't change. So hopefully that helps next go around.
Great. Maybe if we can just give another minute or two for those guys to possibly join. Andrew was confused about the meeting and hopefully is going to log in.
And it looks like Ron has joined us as well.
Great. Okay, let's see. We didn't have any questions or comments about the consent agenda. So I believe we can move forward to public comment on non-agenda items.
Are you going to take a vote on consent?
Oh,
Yep.
sorry. Yes.
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second. Kate, can you take the roll?
Yes. Steve Carreau,
Yes.
Barb Hart,
Yes.
Ron Mitchell,
Yes.
Danielle Kraus,
Yes.
Steve Roundtree.
Yes.
And then Jonathan Baumhofer, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Does anyone, and the consent agenda is approved. Do we have any public comments on non-agenda items? If you have a public comment, please raise your hand. Looking at.
I do. Can
Go
you
ahead.
hear me?
Yes, please state your name.
This is Katrina Harms. I hope you can hear me. I'm sitting at a picnic table in Carbondale, so apologies. Some of you will have heard this from last night. I apologize, but I wanted to speak for just a couple minutes to the DDA about the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funds. And I don't know if the commissioners have reached out to you, but the Peak to Peak Alliance was chosen to be a member of the steering committee that will help Boulder County with the community engagement process that's happening prior to determining how those funds are allocated. It is $63 million, and it's to help respond to community needs, address the COVID economic fallout, lay the foundation for a strong and equitable recovery. The committee was formed, sorry, I'm reading the official thing. The committee was formed from the Knight Foundation and the Community Foundation of Boulder County and has been to collaborate with the community and business leaders to ask for your ideas for building a recovery that is equitable and durable. The steering committee is hoping that the outreach can be done by some of the organizations in the county. They've given us until September 30th to finish the outreach, which is a little crazy. So I was going to request that the DDA, if at all possible, have a I know you guys are still doing virtual, but do a little outreach event with the business community in Netherland to get feedback for the commissioners on what would help the Netherland business community. And there is a toolkit that you can do your own outreach events, or I can help facilitate it, or this group, this firm that was hired by both the commissioners can help facilitate a meeting. So I will send this to Kate, I believe is the director, send the information, and hopefully you guys can take something on like that. And so that we can get the Netherland community's needs in front of the county commissioners. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Katrina. Does anyone have any questions for Katrina? Okay, hearing
Thank you very
none.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katrina.
So let's move on to the action items. And to begin with, we have the aim for the Netherland Public Arts Committee to just kind of wrap up a few things that have been hanging out there. And it looks like Danielle will be introducing that.
I had to unmute myself. Miranda, are you able to bring that up, or should I get another computer to read from?
Nope, I can, you want me to bring up your aim?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I've gone too far. Hold on. Here we go.
Excellent. Thank you. So the business connection is for sale, the business itself along with the building. And we need to be on the same page on how we want to move forward with our mural. And Greg, I saw that you are on here. Thank you for joining tonight. So we have a couple preferences in moving forward. And without just reading over this, I want to save time with that. Rhea pitched in her comment. I'm bringing it up on my phone. So this is what she said. I believe the solution is fairly simple. If the new potential owner doesn't want to keep the mural, then the NDDA will pay and also pay the mural and find a suitable location at that time. Of course, it's good for us to be able to have a backup plan should we need to move it in a hurry. We have no idea when the building will sell and how long a new potential owner will want it there. So I'm not sure how much we can really have a concrete plan, but as a backup besides the BF Shopping Plaza, couldn't it even be temporarily moved into the community center somewhere? And that's the end of her message. I agree with her point of view. I personally think that we should move forward with it. And Kate had a solution that we get a verbal agreement from the potential new owner, videoed, tape recorded. And another solution is to do
Sorry,
the mural.
Danielle, what I meant
Yeah.
was the agreement recorded on the property was one of my solutions. So, and let me get into that just real briefly. So that's what I meant by recording. So we would talk to the owner, and if they were amenable to it, we would keep, because it's typical, especially when you receive grants from like the federal government, that if you receive them from the organization, that you can record them on the property, and it doesn't mess anything up per se, but it just shows that there is a financial commitment and for that was made there, and it would be honored. And so we could put language in there that it would drop off after the 2 years, which is a term of the agreement that we are having to sign with the building owner. And so that was what I was referring to, that we could approach them about that idea as a way to preserve our investment at the property in the mural. but that's just that's one idea coming from my background more with granting, and that would be the solution that we would typically work with other nonprofits or building owners in a similar scenario.
Okay. Thank you. A couple other solutions. I talked to Jill Draves at Wild Bear. She is okay if we move the mural indoor to her center. I measured the door, it would fit. And she has a safe room where the mural could be put up and Greg could work on it. And then we would not need to worry about weather. And that's also a good solution if we are still unsure about the contract with the current building owner. And then we could figure it out from there as the mural is being executed by Greg's work. And Carrie on the Ned Public Art Committee was also going to ask the school if we can move it up there, and I have not heard back from her yet on follow-up. And then there was also a question on who actually owns the mural. The NDDA owns the mural and Greg owns the rights to the artwork. And what we're looking for is to come to an agreement tonight between us so that we can move forward and either decide to bring the mural indoors to work on so it's not on the building and we're not put into position to worry about the contract immediately until there's an agreement with who the building is under contract with and buying it. I don't think we need to worry about the business owner if the business.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry. This is Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi. I'm sorry. I've been trying to get for some reason haven't been able to get on, but now I can hear you, and I will mute myself. So thank you. Okay.
So the question for the board is, can we come up with an agreement on how to move forward? And are there other questions that we need to clarify tonight so that we may move forward? And are there any questions? How can we talk about it?
Danielle, I had a few questions. This is Steve Carew. One was, and it might be more for Greg, but I was wondering what the attachment system is for this mural if we were to put it on the business connection, and if that same attachment system would work on many substrates for, in which case I would think if there is a place indoors that Greg could work, that would be a great solution, is to just work on it and create it indoors. And then if things pan out with the business connection when it's ready, we could install it there. And if not, could it be installed somewhere else easily? So I guess my question is sort of twofold there.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, the mural is already up on the business connection. It is removable and we can mount it somewhere else. And we can take the mounting boards off of the business connection so that you can't tell it was ever there. So it is movable. We can bring it indoors. I do think that is a good solution. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yes, I guess I would think that would be a good solution if it was good with Greg, and if we really had an indoor place, because then weather wouldn't be an issue going into the fall in any case. And then it could just be mounted, wherever the final mounting place ends up being.
Excellent, thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to say real quickly, I did speak with the community center today and asked them specifically about this. They have one space that could potentially fit it, but it would be full sun pretty much all day long, and it didn't seem like that would be a good idea, but maybe Greg can answer that a little bit more about how that would affect it being in the full sun all day long, because obviously Business Connection is a bit in the shade, which seems like a better idea, and maybe it would last a lot longer. So that was my question about location, which we can obviously figure out later if that's okay with everybody.
A concern for me about the community center is I don't believe they are in the business district, are they?
They are not. I don't know if that, they're in the town limits, so I don't know if that would make a difference or not as far as where we hung it, because they are in town limits, but we really didn't clarify that in the contract, so I guess that's something that should be discussed as well.
Okay,
There we go.
I felt that if it's NDDA involved, that it needed to be within the business district, aside from any contracts with the mural. But I do think that's an option. And Greg, do you have any comments about the full sun and the two possibilities we're bringing up?
Well, the full sun, we could put paper over windows, or I could put up a screen or something like that. It's just the community center strikes me as a much more well lit building than the Wild Bear. Wild Bear is pretty dark in there. My other concern is going back to the actual structure of the mural. How much is it rigid once it comes off of those braces? Is it rigid by itself, all 4 panels?
That we have yet to learn, which is what we'll be learning. I would assume if we have the right amount of hands to move it and are working with people who are aware of the delicacy of such a canvas, that we can do it. And I think if we are preparing to move it, we could adjust putting handles onto it and make it easier to do, since we're doing it sooner than we planned. And I think if we do move it before you work on it, that's a wonderful opportunity to learn how well this holds up. And I do think that Barb's community center suggestion is as a new location, whereas Wild Bear's suggestion is as a place to work on it. Is that right, Barb?
I mean, is this something, Greg, that you can work on off-site and we can hold off on where we're going to put it for, I have a feeling the Business Connection is going to be under contract or moving forward in the next month or so, since I've heard so much interest in it. So can we work on it off-site, or do you feel like it needs to be done on the side of the building?
No, I think working off-site is fine. My concern is I feel like the less we move it, the better.
Sure.
And yeah, I have no problems with the big concern we're facing now is that we've lost 10 days or something like that, is weather. And
Right.
From what I see up here, I think we're going to get some weather here pretty soon. But anyway, that's conjecture. So, but it was still, we're looking at getting cold and some winter coming in pretty soon. So I think it's best to find a place off-site for right now.
And you don't have that off-site space, is that correct?
Oh, at my house? Oh, no.
Okay.
No. I mean, I would, if I were going to do it here, I'd put it in underneath a deck or something, but still, that's not going to be good.
Okay. So I'm okay with moving it forward with the idea of starting the project. And the only thing unclear for me is whether or not the Business Connection is the right location to start it on because of the potential sale. I don't have another location off-site that would be a great location to work on it. So if Wild Bear or another space might be available, then I guess we would need to come up with an agreement with them.
Okay.
And that is not something that I have approached. I don't think that there would be that kind of space at the community center for working on it. So I guess that's something else that has to be decided. But overall, I think that we should move forward with the project. But now the question is, where should we move forward with it?
Barb, sorry, Andrew here, and I apologize, guys, for kind of trying to work this through my phone. But I have a Greg. Are you able to? And I'm sorry that I came in late. Are you able to show me a picture, or what approximate size is the mural that you're dealing with?
Well, the exact size is 8 feet by 16 feet.
Okay. I was just gonna say that, you know, one thing that Rasham is, and I don't. Do you have is there a way to display a picture of the mural on the share screen?
Well, I can hold on.
Or Miranda might have that too.
But,
Had
well,
that
I guess
from the
where
previous packet, so I can always pull it.
where I was going with this is that you know, there's 4 concrete shear walls at the 4 corners of Kathmandu that you know, Rasham has been open and extended, you know, the invitation to local artists to put things, you know, paint them and put murals on there. But I don't, you know, without seeing it and without running it by Rasham, you know, I didn't want to run something by, but I still don't see you know. So again, I know the walls that we have are, you know, they're vertical, they're narrow, they're tall, so that might not be the best spot for it unless it were to wrap around, you know, the corner, which would lose the intention. But just throwing that out there, that as far as space available in town, that an owner has said, hey, I'd love somebody to put some murals up and paint, those are some four pillars to consider.
Excellent, Andrew. Thank you. And yes,
Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Rasham was very open to working with Nederland Public Art. However, she did want to wait until the new building was finished, so she didn't take on too much work. Did anybody else have ideas or questions?
I guess I don't necessarily have any questions. It sounds like there's some pretty good thoughts kicking around. With regards to the potential for the community center, I think I had mentioned it a while back, but there are those heat collection units on the backside of the west wing, and where the old, where currently the food pantry uses as a greenhouse. Currently, the backsides of them are just unpainted, untreated plywood. And there's now 3 or 4 of those collector units. I had always kind of thought that would be a great option for some public art back there. 1, as a means to protect the plywood in those units, and 2, it's actually a pretty visible spot as you're driving into town, and would just provide an area that use most likely isn't going to change for the foreseeable future. And if it did, those pieces of plywood could simply be removed and then reallocated to a different area in town. And was just a thought if folks were interested in maybe finding a spot that we weren't worried about losing the art or the mural. So that was my only thought. Otherwise, all of this sounds pretty good.
Excellent, Jonathan. Thank you. I do think that's a great spot to work on for artwork. I think that we should utilize the plywood that is there for a future project. However, we already have the platform for this mural created, and I don't think that it would fit there, though the animals would be beautiful in that location. I'm thinking that might be a separate project, though, but it is something to consider for figuring out tonight. Were there any other questions or comments?
Danielle, this is Steve Carell again. After hearing all this, I think it My comment would be that it just makes sense if we can locate a place where Greg can work on the mural to continue that work. And as far as where it will be placed and how it will be placed could be something for the future. As more clarity comes around the business connection or other possible locations. But it sounds like there's not a lot of downside if we can find a place for Greg to work, because he'd be protected from the weather and could just be working on it. And once it's done, we can work on where to put it, where to mount it.
I agree with you, Steve. I'm thinking and Greg, I know that you are concerned about the lighting inside Wild Bear. She does have spotlighting. She's got at least 3 tracks of spotlighting that can be moved around. I think we would be able to light it up just well for you to be able to work on it. She was very excited about the idea. And one of the things I thought about was how many children from the community would be coming in and watching you work right there in your safe spot. You have walls around you, but you have doors open to people watching what you're doing. My suggestion for the situation is that we would move the mural indoors. I recommend Wild Bear, and then work on the lighting, and then revisit this once we know more about business connection and come up with a solution if that is not the appropriate spot for it. Does that sound good?
My thought on that is, I mean, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to use either one of the schools, because there would be a lot of kids around in community. Same on the community center. And this is going to sound a little weird, maybe, but one of the things is I start working around 4:30 or 5 in the morning. Obviously, I won't have access to any of these buildings at that time, but the sooner I work much better in the morning. So that's something I would like. I mean, I can figure it out, but that's something that I would like to look into as early access or access at all times of day. And is it possible to even consider 7 days a week type of access?
I could ask Jill that at Wild Bear, and I think that she would be able to offer you more access than the school could, especially with some of the events happening in our schools. I think Jill would be more appropriate in potentially giving you a key to the building and letting you work on it as you see that you can. And I can confirm that with her. I do like the idea of the schools, but for your work schedule and availability, I think Jill would most likely be able to grant you better access.
All right. All right. What about, are we anywhere close to even getting started on this, though, to be brutally honest?
If we can come to an agreement tonight, Jill already gave us permission. I already measured. And then we would just need to get people who can help us move it and get it set up, and you can start.
But there's the contracts, which I've already signed, actually.
Yes, we are only waiting for the NDDA to sign a contract, and I'm sure we could write something up quickly to have Jill's agreement on board for having a space for you to work. Does that sound appropriate to the board?
I'm fine with signing the contract with the questions that have been clarified tonight on who owns the artwork, and also on not immediately putting it on the business connection because we're still waiting for a confirmation from them. But for Greg to get started, absolutely. I think that we should move forward with that. I'll get the contract back in from my end by tomorrow and get payment facilitated, which we're waiting on something else tonight to happen for that, but that will happen tonight, I believe. So that should be no problem on that side. So I think that we should move forward with all of it with that contingency of doing it offsite until we have our for sure site figured out.
That
And-
All
sounds
right.
good to me.
Yep, Wild Bear sounds great.
So I have plans to talk with Jill this evening after our meeting, and I will go over that with her. And while we're talking about the mural, I also wanted to check in on Dale Sorter being paid for the mural installation. And I know that you guys were working on the signatures, but I just wanted to touch base on that.
That should all be sorted out tonight, correct, Kate? We
Yeah,
have to
I
have
don't know.
this.
Do we have an invoice from him, Danielle?
Yes, Kate, I sent it to you and
Okay.
you confirmed that you got it.
Okay, I'll go through and I'll see what's going on. But yeah, we're changing one of the items this evening is signature authority so that we can switch all that, and I have access to the accounts that I haven't had access to. So I'll look through that.
Okay. Is
Thanks,
this
Danielle.
something? Yes? Oh, sorry.
No, I
Is
just
this
said thanks.
something? Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. Is this something that we need to have an agreement from everybody that we're gonna look into Wild Bear and move forward with it?
This is Andrew Dewart here. So when you say Wild Bear, we're talking about a mural inside of the current Wild Bear location in the shopping center?
Just to have the space to create it, since the business connection is not for sure what's going to happen. So to give Greg the ability to start creating the mural, Wild Bear has offered their space to create it. And then we move forward from there once we know what's happening with the business connection, which was our original where we were going to put it, but now it's for sale. So to start the mural, let's get going. Let's get Greg working on it. Wild Bear has offered their space. I believe we only need a nod of 4. Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, to move forward with all of that. And then the financial side of it is something that is later in our meeting to just figure out signature information for the bank, and that will be decided tonight as well. So we don't have to go beyond that. I don't think we have to have an official agreement in place other than he has the ability to create the artwork at Wild Bear.
Got it. Okay, so creating, basically because of temperature and paint conditions, using Wild Bear as the space to create the mural, but then there's the kind of additional challenge of having to take it apart and move it and put it back up, and any potential touch-ups or things associated with that, correct?
Correct.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, I think we have a nod of 4 to move forward on that. Seems like.
Yes, we have 6 board members on the meeting right now. Is there anyone that would not give the nod to move forward with the project? Great. Do we need anything else, Kate?
I don't think so. If Danielle feels like and Greg feel like they have what they need.
Do you feel content, Greg?
Yeah, I just, yep. Let's get that contract signed and we'll get going. And then I guess, Danielle, we can talk about moving it, or if you want to just get your guys that put it up to work on it. I'd probably just get in the way.
I'll need to find guys.
Okay.
And I can start working on that, and I will talk with Jill too.
Adios. Or good. That sounds good. I think if we're done, then I think I'll say goodnight.
I think we're good. Thank you, Greg.
All right.
Thanks,
Good,
Greg.
good seeing
Thank
you
you,
guys.
Danielle.
Bye-bye.
As it is. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That means we can move on to the 2022 budget, and Kate is going to introduce that.
All right. Miranda, would you pull up the PDF that I sent you this afternoon? All right. So what you're looking at right now is what I had sent you previously with the budget, the year to date, and then where the year-end projections were. And now I've put in my suggestions for the operating based on the trends and that. So I'd like to go through that with each of you, just so that you know my thought process. And then we'll move on to capital projects and talk about where we are in spending, how much is available, and how much you want to fund or what you want to do for 2022. Does anybody have any questions before I get started?
Yes, Kate, this is Steve Carell. I had a question on this that's on the screen right now.
Okay.
I was wondering what the column year end means.
That's my year-end projection.
And so for the year, like the year to date that's how it would end up at
Where
12/31.
that's year to date is where we are right now. As of the end of August, this is where we are. And the year-end projections are what I pulled out of where I saw us being by 12/31.
Okay. But the reason I asked that was I thought that's what it was, but then I see like on the Dda Secretary and Personnel, year to date looks like 6,000 and then year end would be 4,000. So I didn't
Yes.
understand how it would go down.
Oh, I'm sorry. What I meant by the 6,000 is that's where we are that's all we've spent of the 24 is the 6,000 on that line item. I apologize. That's actually a typo. So we haven't spent that much in that category. That's why I'm saying that we'll probably be at 4,000, but I can double check that number, but I think that's actually a typo on that line. I apologize.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks. Yeah, it was just trying to understand it, so that helps.
But yeah, I think when I was working on that's what I was thinking, that's all we previously spent. So it's not like that in the other category, but I think that I was working through some other thoughts, and that's why I put that line in there.
Okay. And so just for that one, for clarity, do you have an idea for a projection where the 24,000, let's see, the budget, 6,000 is what spent year to date, I guess?
Yes.
Like where that might end up?
So I'm thinking that we'll end up with about 4,000 left.
Okay.
Year end.
Okay. So like having spent 20,000 then?
Exactly. So,
okay. All right, thanks. That was my main question.
Rita, hi there. So is the year end, maybe instead of year end, is that should that be available balance? I'm also confused, by the way. So,
okay.
So I wanted to just understand this better. So if we use the DDA secretary, 24,000 was budgeted, right? That's
yes.
what you're saying. And year to date actual is what 6,000 is. That is what has been spent.
Yes.
Okay. And is the year end, would that be then, should that be 18,000 because that's what's left?
No, so year end would be the balance I see at year end available is the way that I did that. And so that's where I'm saying that at 12/31 there will be $4,000 left in that line.
Oh wow. So you're only spending 20 grand out of the 24.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So okay. For year end.
So I apologize for the confusion on this.
Okay.
And then I'm a little confused also just with with that one.
Yeah, I messed up. I'm seeing something. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, then I don't see how that is working for the other.
Exactly. I was in my own head on this and I didn't. So I apologize. So that is the same logic. So I think maybe the easiest way would be to ignore the year to date a little bit and look at year end because that's really the projection. The year to date, I can tell you about spending from that, but I do think I'm sorry that I put it in that way because that is getting confusion. So I could just tell you as we're kind of going through. I think maybe could I just run through each line with you?
Sure.
And then maybe that'll help everyone.
Yeah.
Because that was my thought, that I would just kind of run through my thought processes here, because I do have a couple of questions that I just want to follow up with you guys on. So for legal, your 2021 budget was $2,500. We haven't spent anything yet in that category. So by year end, I'm thinking we might have 1,500. We may have some room to pay for legal for a few things. I've just kind of been very conservative with that. So I'm thinking at the year end, we may have $1,500 left over. So for 2022, I was thinking that we should probably just budget 1,500. Does anybody have any questions on any of that or any comments about how much legal services you've used in the past?
No questions. I think that we should have some budgeted for next year.
Okay. So I've got 1,500 right now based on what I'd seen in previous balances as well in 2017, 2018 when we did the deep dive. So that was where I put that for right now. Now, with regard to IT, we had some prior balance moving in, and then this year the budget was only 100. So we actually have $350 sitting for IT, and I don't know if we'll be really spending anything for the rest of the year on that. I put in 350 for IT for the next year in case there's something that arises, but that's another budget light item that I could see going back down to 100 or two. But I wanted to check with everyone's comfortability with that.
I think that it's a small enough number that it shouldn't be such a big deal. You know, I could see
Okay.
if there is an IT episode that we need IT, could easily cost $350 for one incident.
Okay, and that was my thought as well. But you know, as well, you'll see our mill levy income is projected at 33,600, and our current budget, as I've laid it out, is 33,301. So so that is why I'm kind of getting into a little bit of the weeds with you guys. I just want to make sure that I'm setting us up for success. The next item is accounting, and this year we spent a lot more on accounting than we will be moving forward. And so in previous years, we had budgeted $600 a year. And so I've taken us back to that amount now that I'll be taking over the bookkeeping and the things that we were paying the additional funds for this year. The Dda Secretary and Personnel. So this is really the biggest category change because of my salary and now the fact that I am a salaried employee and that we're doing payroll. And so that's why you see the increase in that category because this includes the payroll taxes and fees, Social Security, and the gusto fees for running payroll. Any questions? All right, and we have an election line item, and I don't see the need that we would need to have any funds in there, but I see that we have a carryover. So I wanted to check with Steve or Ron and see, is there a need for that to be a line item this year, or do we need to put aside some money each year to save for that event? I wanted to check in on that.
Yeah, it's maybe a good point to put some aside, but maybe not the way our budget works. But
Okay.
yeah, we don't have any. I think it's every 7 years.
Yes.
And it was a couple of years ago that we did it. So we have about 5 years before the next election.
Okay.
So, but I understand if it is an operating budget thing, that's always tough for us because as you can see, we're right up against the revenue right now.
Yeah, and it's a chunk of money. Okay.
Yeah. But on the flip side of that issue is, from what I've understood from Karen Garrity and chiming in on this in the past, is when we have these type of balances left over, the $5,560 or whatever it was, that I think Karen has said, and we could always, Barb and you could confirm more, that can sort of go back into the general pot for operations to help fund, future years.
Okay.
So that's if that truly is the case, then I don't think there's a need to, for us to budget it each year just to save money up. If you understand, follow me on that.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Sure.
Now on for office supplies, I budgeted 200, which is fairly in line with where things have been. That's a small thing. Postage and shipping, consistent with 100 or that. Boulder County tax collection, that stays stagnant pretty much at the 500. Bank fees, 50. I've kept that. Held that. Advertising, we've kept that as well as at 500 at the regular level. Printing and copying at 100. Again, that's consistent with what we've been spending. Conference and training, I cut that down a little bit just because we haven't been spending on that necessarily, but there is, I left $1,000 in the budget so that if there is an opportunity that anyone would like to take advantage of, that we have that available. And then for annual memberships and dues, I have our membership to DCI, and that is how I got to our operating budget. And I apologize for the clumsiness there, but I'm hopeful that that was helpful in clarifying things, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't have any questions. Should we just go around the circle real quick, or just leave it open that anybody can ask one if they have one?
I think, go ahead. I think everyone should understand that budget is an estimate. And if we go somewhat over or under, we can adjust it according to prior budgets. So if we have income of 33,000, we don't use it all this year, we still could put it in the budget next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. This is Steve Carew again. I just want to say I like this. I think it's nice to have you run through it, Kate. And we generally, for the couple of years I've been on the board, 2 or 3 now, there hasn't been much fluctuation in a lot of these items. So I think we can, nail them down pretty close the way you have done. So to me, it looks really reasonable.
Great. And
Does
thank you
anyone-
for all your help getting this together, Steve, and your historical knowledge.
For sure. Yeah, that can help.
Does anyone else have a question? Andrew, Steve Roundtree, or Danielle, Jonathan?
No, I don't have any questions.
No questions.
Yeah, no questions from me. Thank you for going through and explaining what was in each column.
Yeah, no questions. Definitely appreciate.
Great, thank you. Do we have any public comment on the item? Okay, hearing none. Are we going to, let's see, we need to move into the
capital projects.
Capital projects and kind of make some decisions there on what projects we might want to do in the next year.
So let me walk through this a little bit so that you guys all are well aware of how much money we're talking about that we're working with right now. So, and this will help me with some clarification as well. So for beautification, we, like Rhea said, we spent so much less than we thought we were going to. And so I'm predicting that we're going to have $20,932 left at the end of the year, potentially. We may get a few more invoices, but we're going to have a good chunk of that left. And then also for beautification, or for Big Springs parking, I estimated that at year end we would have 180,000 still remaining. And Andrew and Ron, jump in if you think there's going to be a bigger bill then, but that's just kind of based on what we've seen thus far, that's what'll be remaining in that pot. The website will still have $2,500 probably remaining, as well as event support. We've only granted that $1,000 to Wild Bear, and so or not Wild Bear, to Ned. So we'll have about $4,500 left in that as well. So those, keeping all of that in mind, you'll see at the bottom of that column, $207,982 committed right now out of all of that we're currently working on based on what I've seen. So that's why I hope, you all speak up as we go through this if there's something that I'm missing, but that's where I got that number. Your Tiff estimate, we're estimating for 2022, you'll bring in about $350,000 for the Tiff. our current account balance is 817,482, less the projects that I referenced. That's $586,602.18. So your total available for 2022 is around $936,602.
Saran Mitchell speaking. I think we're definitely going to have to increase our projection for the Big Springs parking project. And I would estimate, again, Andrew, you chime in what you think, but I would put 250,000 in there because construction costs have almost tripled. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, sure. Well, certain things, yeah, definitely construction costs have gone up across the board. Trucking, I think as far as the timing of this project, currently, just so everyone knows, we are still waiting for TBO to submit, and they're going with a pre-engineered concrete panel wall system from a third party that is basically going to do the engineering for them. So these are like the panels that, and again, I have not seen an actual submittal yet of this, but panels that sit in between steel supports that kind of angle upwards. So what does that have to do with the price of things? I think it'll be interesting to see what competitive bids we get from TBO's contractor as well as other contractors. And I think, we're going to have to make a decision, and obviously this is further down the road, but just because one contractor may be able to do the sewer for less, and another contractor, we have to take all factors into consideration. I'll try and keep it short here. Yes, costs have gone up, inflation, fuel is going up, everything is going up. So, Ron, just to keep it short, 250,000 would be, a place where I would go, if not, maybe 265. And hopefully it comes in lower than that. And the modular system that TBO is proposing is able to go faster, but again, we have not yet seen these engineered drawings. We're waiting for them. JVA is waiting to basically tie this whole package together once they receive the third-party engineering from this Ready Wall system, which is what it's called. So that's the kind of both the budget talk and the Big Springs parking update a little bit all in one there for you.
One of the reasons for putting this figure in too is to hedge our bets, because if we have uncommitted funds, I do want to see if we have enough to put 400,000 into a money order account after we go over all the other projects. So go ahead, Kate.
And Kate, I just had another question on this here. For the bottom green square that you have the Tiff estimate, that's revenue coming in 350,000. Our current balance, is that like our current balance in the TIF fund is 817?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And when you say less projects, is that projects that we've either spent or that
It's
we've
less,
just committed money toward?
yes. So it's less that 207,982 that you see from the year-end column above.
Oh, okay, got it. So the amount isn't 587,000 or
That's the total, what's remaining after you take that, and then the total available. So that's how I got to the total available.
Oh, okay. So 817 minus the 207982 equals the
Exactly.
586.
Exactly.
Okay.
Question, Kate. The town did not get the grant for the funds we committed to a 20% match. Did you have it in there and did you back it out?
I backed it out. So that's the 70,000 that you'll see. And I say not received, a question mark is the note there, but we didn't receive that. So I didn't calculate that into that 207, and I haven't. So it's done.
Wonderful.
So I wonder if we can start at the top with beautification and go line by line and agree with an amount to put into the 2022 budget.
If that makes sense to you, we can start off that we can do it that way. So beautification, how much are we thinking about budgeting for beautification next year, given that we've been able to make some economies with water, etc., but knowing that there is other work that they want to do for next year, hardier plants, making the planters a little fuller. I know that there are some different things that Mike and Rhea had started spitballing about.
I would like to see it carry over the same amount from 2021, even though we have not used the full amount, because next year we are going to do more stuff. So I'd like to see it at 25,000.
Does everybody agree with 25,000? If anybody doesn't agree,
To me, it sounds really high because I know like back in 2018 to 2019, we had a really big increase on beautification. And I think it was just about a lot more planters around town and flowers and the labor costs to water them. And so it went way up. But Barbara, what sort of things are you thinking that we're not doing this year that would?
Pretty much nothing got done at the shopping center, which is the largest business in town, with 19 tenants. And we are doing beautification for other personal and town properties. And it would be really nice if something was done for all of the businesses like that. And that would include putting something back in there, as well as filling out some of the planters that really were kind of wimpy this year. Now that we know the water system works, let's kind of add to it. So if we don't use all the money, that's great, but I would like to put the same amount of money in that we had budgeted this year so that next year we can complete some of the things that just didn't happen for this year for whatever reason.
Okay. And so from your answer, it sounds like it'll be mostly planters and plants that weren't done.
Exactly. Yep. And just filling out the planters a little more than they were this year, the ones that were done.
Uh-huh.
Was the planter by the train cars considered in the budget? I noticed there's nothing in it. Anybody know anything about that?
Nothing was done around the shopping center at all this year, including the planters by the train cars.
I definitely think we should include those. The merchants really appreciated it, and I think it's very important that we keep this beautification program alive and well.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, yeah, my only question was what didn't we do this year that we'd want to do next year to account for such a big budget? Over what we've spent, because I think a lot of our money too was saved in labor with Michael Reichert, not having to water nearly as much, which should carry forward in the future.
Right, and it also not having to water as much, and which was partly because a lot of the flowers weren't there, but also because the water systems are working so much better than they did previously. And
Right.
again, if we budget it, Rhea and whoever's on beautification this year will come forward with their own specific budget, in the next few months of what they expect to do for the next year. So we're just giving it a round number, and then we expect to see something saying this is how the year ended and what we're looking at next year. And we do normally get that in early spring. Actually, I think we saw it in January this year.
Yeah.
Is Ray on tonight?
No.
No,
She's
unfortunately,
not.
it's not a conflict.
Yeah.
Well, also I wanted to mention that, you know, as Barbara, as you just mentioned, this is the projects, the TIF budget, which is less regimented with the town than the operating. And I think you're right that, you know, if we have the, say, the 25,000 in there, that should certainly cover whatever we end up wanting to do, where we don't have to go back to the Board of Trustees and have them approve, you know, raising the budget for beautification midway through next year. And it doesn't mean in any way that we're going to spend that much money. So I'm in favor of it as well. I was just curious about the details.
All right. Danielle.
Andrew,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead, Andrew.
Go ahead, Danielle. Oh, all right. I guess when you know, one thing that kind of comes to mind, which would be interesting, is, you know, as far as metrics and cost per square foot of, you know, and I realize that not all planters are the same, but if we have some standard of, you know, X amount of labor, X amount of square footage of, you know, flowers, and are we applying kind of, is there some consistent metric that's being applied to evaluate, you know, the various, and I realize potted plants, hanging plants are different than, you know, ground plants. I'm just trying to think of, you know, just a round number, and maybe I'm, you know, off base here, and sorry if that doesn't sound right, but I'm just kind of curious as to what we're getting for 25,000, and if there's certain areas that are, you know, costing quite a bit, and other areas that, you know, don't cost as much. That's just something I'm curious about. That's all.
And that would come in on the individual budget from the beautification committee.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Barb.
Yeah.
This is Danielle. It makes sense to me, and this might help with your question too, Andrew, that if there was a budget for 25,000 and that included being able to review the planters and bring in more planters and then fix the watering system to be more efficient. It sounds like that was not done at the shopping center, so having the available funds to take care of that and address continuing upgrading everything, it would be good to have it available. And we had so much water this year from rain. Preparing for not having as much rain next year would be great. If we don't have a budget for the 25,000, I would at least want to carry over the 20,932. But if we have the budget for making those amending the pots and amending the watering system, it would be nice to keep it. I'm for keeping the budget as it is. That's all.
Great. Thanks, Danielle. Steve Roundtree, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I think it should be the 25,000. It's a great thing to have.
Great. Thank you. And Jonathan?
Yeah, I can agree that it's wise to keep in the 25,000. We did have a lot of rain this year, and it was an excellent year for gardens. I guess one question, and it's probably actually for the specific beautification committee, is this beautification and specific to flowers 100% focused on annuals, or is there discussion in the works for establishment of perennial beds, specifically pollinator perennial beds? It seems like if we have a $25,000 budget, we could actively start to work to cultivate long-term beds that are maybe not necessarily planters, but actually allocate certain areas that we could get access to on outside of establishments to start to establish perennials that would come back year after year. So then we're looking simply at the labor cost for watering them, not actually at the cost of purchasing annual plants every year.
I can speak to that, just maybe other people remember as well, but yeah, there was a lot of discussion, Jonathan, this past year about introducing more perennials and having fewer annuals. And one of the big hurdles that we were facing, and I think there were some perennials planted, but one of the big problems with it was that in the raised beds and the planters, the roots freeze or get too cold in our winters, and so they weren't coming back the next year when we had tried them a few years back. But I think this current year there were some more perennials planted. And I agree with your vision very much, and I think just something has to be done to maybe select the perennials that would make it through the winter in a planter, if that's the case, or plant them in the ground.
Yeah, my question would be, are we looking at, because I agree, and yeah, perennials will never do well inside of any planter or raised bed, but they do pretty well in, it's a quasi raised and sunken bed, so you actually dig out the soil for a few feet down and then you raise the bed. And so it's a mix between a raised bed and in ground. And I'm curious, have we looked at areas where we might be able to establish that by the train cars or around BNF, the division, and BNF? I just think of that little strip on the side of the BNF in between the parking lot and that. And I happen to know, and we all know, that we pile about 30 feet of snow on that thing every winter. And actually, perennials have no problem being buried under 30 feet of snow, and it provides a heck of a lot of water for those perennials. So I'm curious if we're looking at places that we actively store snow during the wintertime that during the summertime are kind of just open space, and if we could work with property owners and business owners to start to get permission to establish gardens and beautification in those areas. So, and I totally agree, we should keep this at 25,000, but I would like to see that 25,000 used to start to establish permanent, sustainable beautification that doesn't require purchasing plants every year.
I can definitely say a lot of us are on board with that, Jonathan. And just from a perspective of the shopping center, I can say the sprinkler systems are broken. There's a reason that our shopping center looks as terrible as it does this year, because we haven't had the water and we haven't had someone to maintain it since Steve left in a regular fashion. So I think that's worth exploring. That specific space is actually a dog walking station. So I don't know how much you would want to plant there, because people do walk their dogs there, along with next to the liquor store. But I think it's definitely worth exploring, and something that we should discuss more with the beautification committee in the next couple of months as we come up with what to use that money specifically for in town, and whether or not, Tebow or even tenants like myself would be willing to chip something into getting some gardens planted and things on the property.
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Kate, do you want to, so we're okay with putting the 25,000 in beautification? Can we move forward with the others? I know we have a couple more things on the agenda that we want to discuss tonight that might take a little bit of time. So can we?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll just queue up the wayfinding. I think this is the next one that'll be a little bit of discussion about how we want to move wayfinding forward in amounts. So that's the next item to discuss.
And Steve knows a little bit more about that, but they weren't ready to come back and talk to us yet, because we do have to make some decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to that just briefly in this conversation. And I think it was also on me a lot that I didn't have the time to connect with them before this meeting. But we are going to be getting together with Barbara's on the committee now, and Claudia, who's no longer board member, is on the committee. So we're going to get together soon and then meet with Merge again. But the gist of what I got was that our board is concerned about what the overall cost might be for wayfinding, and of course that's a reasonable thing. And I think we'll end up breaking it into 2 or 3 phases that we'll bring back to the next meeting, with ideas like that. So thinking of it in different phases, I still think it is going to be a fairly expensive project overall, but I don't really have much of an idea yet about, say, if we were in the coming year, if we were able to get the first phase underway. I don't really have any reasonable guess as to what the costs would be. But my gut feeling is that if we could budget more than the 100,000 that we budgeted this year, that would be good. And we may not even get to spending much at all of it in terms of actually fabricating and installing any signage or developing an app, if that's the direction we go. But
do you have a proposed amount, Steve?
Well, I would say I really is sort of a wild guess on my part at this point because I haven't done the homework with Merge and our committee hasn't. But I would propose maybe bumping that up to 150,000, which would at least wouldn't hamper us if we were able to really get something going for the coming year and say get in the initial traffic signage for the parking lots and develop an app or something like that. So that would be my preference, but it's not really based on any concrete numbers.
Well, from the last presentation that Merge gave us, it did pretty much make it seem like we can do what we want and they'll work with our budgets. So I do think that kind of helps us, with guesstimating for the year, knowing that they'll work with us to get some things done. And then, maybe it is a different phase in another year.
Right. Yeah, because I think it will end up being, multi-year and multi-phases for sure. But I also want to just chime in that I think it is a really important project for the DDA and for town. I really feel like if we do it right, it has a great potential to really increase the viability of businesses within town. So I do think that it's a great project to keep moving forward.
Any other comments on wayfinding? Does anybody not agree with 150,000?
I mean, I think again, 150,000 back to the original contract with Merge it was how much?
I think it's about 23,000, but that was just the contract that's just for the design phase. Doesn't include
just for the design. But then, I would just want to make sure that we're not marrying ourselves to Merge as far as that they're the ones that would, be doing the actual construction of the sign work, and that would be put out for, competitive bids. I'm still, a big proponent of really kind of looking at the different areas and locations that really need it and places that don't. And again, back to the digital, the apps, and how much more can be gotten out of because again, I know that everyone's on their phone all the time, and how much can be gotten out of an app versus something up here that is getting hammered by the weather and whether it's glaring sun, bright sun, or snow, or I just I have strong opinions on wayfinding and how it should be done, and I think I really want to scrutinize what what that money is going to be allocated for, and if there's a clear design from Merge and how to implement that. So far, I still don't feel like we have a clear design Merge, or we've even given them total direction to come up with a clear phase design plan for wayfinding.
No, that's correct, Jonathan. I mean, sorry, Andrew. And I'd want to confirm that Merge is all about design. They do not do any production or sell signs or anything. So we're not married to them in any way. They would give us, part of the contract is that we would design and figure out the phases and what makes sense for our town. And then they would help with generating basically like construction ready drawings, and that they could also help with identifying some subcontractors that might be good to reach out to. But yeah, so it's not anything about, getting married to them. And the other thing is for the initial, I've forgotten the exact number, but let's call it for the initial contract with them. What we're expecting to come out of that with is the phases identified and, what signage and what components would be in each phase, and the construction ready documents for the physical signage and the kiosks if we go with that. If it's an app, that's something we would be developing on our own without Merge's help, although they also have some, people they could recommend. So yeah, so anyway, that just to clarify that. So we would end up, I think, with this contract having a clear understanding of what different phases we want to break this into and what signs we really need around town. And then if it's an app, then we would be working on an app, or if there's kiosks involved, they would give us construction ready documents on those as well. So essentially they're just, one way or another, we're going to get to the point where we have what we need from them as far as the stages. And then we would, we could work with them in the future for more details as needed on different phases.
Yeah, I think, part of my reticence is also the fact that kind of the wayfinding committee has, just shifted and needs to maybe coalesce again and come to an agreement and be a real committee. So that's just something to throw out there. I think, it's important to have a group of people that are really paying attention and kind of leading the way. And since several members have stepped down, I think it's important to have, get those members replaced with people who have interest. Obviously, I have interest, and I'd be willing to be on the wayfinding committee if that's even up for discussion right now. But I think kind of hitting the pause button and seeing where we're at and where we're going is important at this point.
Great, thanks, Andrew. I think that that's really important. I think that the goal tonight is to set our budget, and obviously we have to come back as a committee, both Steve and I, and as he said, Claudia is still willing to work on it even though she's off the DDA. So that's the next step of it, but we have to set this year what we're going to set aside for wayfinding. And as we heard from Merge, the process is going to be a little more expensive. So if we can come up with a number, if we can come up with numbers for our budget tonight for all of these items, then we have to come back next month for wayfinding, and we have to come back for beautification in November, December. So tonight we're just trying to figure out numbers to plug into each of these holes so that we can complete our budget to present to the BOT, who has to then approve it as well. So hopefully that makes sense to just start coming up with numbers of what we think might happen. And I agree with Steve that we need to put a little more in the budget. And again, nothing gets spent without DDA approval. All of this is going to have to come back to the board. But we're trying to come up with what we think might happen next year, so we have that money set aside in the overall budget of the DDA.
Thanks, Barb.
So maybe a 35% increase in Merge's original contract?
That's a different contract. That's not what we're talking about, though. We're actually talking about the actual wayfinding project. Merge contract is approved and will be finished when they give us the final drawings and things that they're going to give us. We're talking about the actual process of wayfinding and putting it into our budget for next year so we can move forward. So this is
And
not to merge.
yeah,
So
so
wait. So I guess I'm confused. Do we have a complete design from Merge?
They will complete that, but they can't complete that until we give them direction. But that's a different contract. That's not
So
in.
kind of like this is like the chicken and the egg scenario. Was what I'm hearing is like.
No, Andrew.
No.
No.
Okay.
No, what this is think of it like Big Springs parking.
Yeah.
The 100,000 or 150 or whatever we come up with for next year is going to be to pay contractors to build signs and install them and get permits and all that kind of stuff. So it's for the actual work that could be done. Right now we're in the design stage with Merge, and that's already been, approved and will be spent. But this money for next year is like, assuming we can move the project forward and we get a design that everyone's happy with, then we would go start putting out bids for contractors to build the signs and bids for installers to come install it and all that kind of stuff. So that's what this budget is for.
Okay, I just still feel like the delta of the orders of magnitude of cost of, installs we were seeing, it'd be really hard for me to throw a budget number at what, wayfinding should cost at this point. That's all. It's just super hard for me to wrap my head around. That's all.
Yeah, if we could think of it as a placeholder, really, it's not anything that we're committed to spending, but without it, it's a trouble next year. If we do get rolling and we want to spend it, then we have to go back and amend this budget and have the BOT approve that. So this is more like we're taking all the money we have available to spend and apportioning it into different projects as placeholders.
Okay, I understand. Thanks.
I have a concern. You've mentioned signs being placed. Has anybody been studying the placement of signs relative to the sign code in the town? Because I'd hate to see this project mature and then boom, the sign code prohibits certain signs from being put up, and whether or not the sign code could be overridden by the Board of Trustees. And this has been bothering me during the whole project, and I bring it up now because I think it's a significant factor, and I don't think it's been considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. And yes, I have made notes of that. And we will, before we even figure out placement of signs and content of signs, we will be checking in closely with the town with the sign code and dealing with that so that we're not designing something that we can't install. But thanks for the reminder on that.
Well, just to piggyback on Ron's, I think dealing with the town sign code is far less of an issue. The local BOT is quite easy to work with, I think, a lot of the time, especially for projects that the community at large agrees with. Fundamentally, I think what's a reality within our town is dealing with CDOT restrictions, specifically CDOT's sign policies and their permitting process for the installation of signs on CDOT right-of-way, which largely the 2 or 3 main highways that move through our town are CDOT right-of-way, and any signage off of that highway requires a specific permitting process with CDOT, as well as design dictates that are dictated by CDOT. So I'm totally fine with putting the budget where you guys are asking for. I think that's probably wise, but I would question the next time and ask that when the wayfinding committee come together, that they take the time to reach out to CDOT, figure out CDOT's right-of-way policies, figure out the design dictates for these signs, and then do a cost analysis of the effectiveness of these signs per per sign versus potentially looking at an app-based system or something closer to an app-based system. There are many towns that I could be happy to share that have app-based wayfinding as well as app-based, budget allocations. And I think it would be something that would be very worthwhile to look into before we get too far down the line of paying money for final designs for physical signs and then realizing that the cost of those signs beyond what MERS or whatever contract company has designed for us will also then need to meet CDOT design dictates, which would then take that back to the drawing board, and that company would have to incorporate those design dictates into them. So I think there's a lot of moving pieces with the wayfinding, and I would be less worried about Town of Nederland sign codes than I would be concerned about the requirements that CDOT has for placing signs along their highways and their right-of-ways.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. That's a good point. And MERGE is extremely up to date on, working with Department of Transportations for all the states. They work in all around the country. So they're really up on that. And that's part of their job is to reach out to CDOT and make sure that they're in compliance with what they're, designing. So that will be taken into consideration, and they are very well versed in that because they do it with departments of transportation all over the country. So yeah, I made a note of that as well when we talked to them, but it's part of what we've already been discussing with them, that they know all the codes and reach out to the particular state they're working in to make sure they're on board with it.
Well, that is great to hear, and I would be just fine with putting your proposed budget plan in, knowing that if we don't spend it, it can be carried on, and we should have a placeholder and the ability to follow this project through. So thanks for all your hard work, Steve.
Sure, thank you for the reminders too, both you and Ron.
Does anyone not agree with the 150,000 that Steve and Barb are requesting for wayfinding? Okay. Now, if we're ready, I'll move on to Big Springs. I already heard Andrew and Ron say 265, 250. How do people feel about 265 in the budget for Big Springs?
I like that.
I'm fine with that.
Anybody have any questions about that? All right, we'll move on to Netherland Fire Protection District. And this would be the continuation of the IGA for 2022. And it's a little under, the amount that we spend is a little under 24,000. So that's what I'm suggesting for Netherland Fire Protection District for 2022. If there's the appetite to continue that IGA with the board.
I'm in favor of it. I think that number sounds good.
Yep, I'm in favor.
Yes, in favor.
Yep,
Agreed.
same, in favor.
Great.
I'm in favor. I guess I have one question. Have we actively reached out to the Fire Protection Board currently? There's been a changeover in our fire chief, and currently we have no fire chief, just an interim fire chief, which we don't actually even have an interim fire chief, just staff currently filling that role. And I know that from the reports that I read, they're looking at potentially redoing their pay scales as well as their benefit package to make a more competitive ability to actually hire somebody who we need in this town. I believe we've had the position out now for at least a couple months and have 0 bites on it. And largely the board determined in their last meeting that was because it's not a competitive position for what they ask of this individual as our fire chief. And I'm curious if we've reached out to the board and if they might have more information about what that new pay scale benefit package will incorporate, and if they are seeking potentially a little bit more funding, and if this board is in any way interested in providing them with a little bit more funding, I find that a fire protection district is a key thing to have, especially for a business community as well as the community at large. And I've always thought that that's a really kind thing that this board does, that is not necessarily part of its directive, but shows goodwill toward the community at large.
I agree with Jonathan on that, and I believe Rick is on the call, Rick Henriksen,
Mhm.
and he probably could tell us a little bit more about where that is for the process and what our 25,000 really offsets for the fire department.
Hi, it's Rick Henriksen. I'm here. I be careful here not to answer questions that the board could or should be answering, but just a couple things. The board has not posted the position of fire chief yet. They're working with our HR provider, which is CPS, to do a nationwide search that hopefully will be starting fairly soon. We are short in one of our shift captain paramedic positions. That was posted earlier, and we didn't get in the spring when another member resigned. That hasn't. We didn't get any bites then. I think that's part of the reason why they're looking at pay scale and other things. And that should be reposted fairly soon, I believe. But again, that's going to be a board question. Specifically, they've been meeting pretty regularly to try to work through these things as quickly as possible. As far as what the current funding that you've been giving basically goes to, it's around half of my salary as fire marshal, and that's doing all inspections, plan reviews, working on the code adoption, upgrading, things like that, working a lot with the town and that sort of thing. I think that answered the big ones I heard. Was there anything else that anybody had questions on?
Yeah, Rick, this is Steve Carew.
Hi, Steve.
Hi. Do you agree that I think it was a couple years ago when the fire department brought this to the board as an IGA item, and wasn't it figured out, like it was essentially started by taking a percentage of the TIF revenue that the NDDA got at the expense of the fire, whatever your pot bucket is that the fire department would have gotten had the DDA not existed?
Yeah, it was 50% of that money.
Okay. Yeah, and so anyway, that's how I remembered it, and so it sounds like, just for the board to be aware, if we're talking about that the board that the fire department needs more money for their budget, because they need to pay salaries higher and things like that. That's a shift in the methodology that we started with for how we came up with the amount that we were doing the IGA each year for. And I'm not saying that it's bad, but just to be aware that it would be a shift in our thinking about the IGA. And I just want to stress, I don't think that's good or bad. It's just a different way of approaching it. And maybe, with this, all the prices going up and everything, it's time to reassess how that's calculated or, agreed upon. So anyway, thanks, Rick, for clarifying that, because that was my memory, but I wasn't positive.
Sure, no problem.
I would just jump in and add that, if we're moving towards 2018 fire code, if that does happen, the amount of inspections and reviews and dedicated time that fire staff will need to set aside to deal with that is going to go up tremendously. So I guess to your point, Steve, yeah, re-examining how things are looked at, because being in a, wildland urban interface like Nederland, where, we are highly at risk, and we're trying to improve building codes and, protect our community. The firefighters have their hands full, and then to throw in a building inspector slash firefighter combo, it's a lot of work. So I just want to honor everything Chris done and say that re-examining how that number is calculated is something that probably should happen. That's all.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you for that. I just want to say you're absolutely right that with the new code and with the changes proposed, that will take a fair amount more time on either my part or whoever eventually replaces me doing this, just with doing additional inspections and things that Safe Built doesn't do, because pretty much anything fire code, they defer to us. So if we put more on our plate through that process, then yeah, it's more time.
Well, I do have a suggestion that'll kind of maybe meet us in the middle. So, like Steve said, this is based on a line in the year-end statement that we receive. We could adjust to the 2020 statement or the 2021 the most recently received statement. We could adjust the amount to reflect still that same line item. So it's still the same spirit of how we got to the calculation, but the amount will most likely go up a little bit. So that could be how we land on our number. And then if we're seeing a bigger need, and I can request a kind of an update from the board, see if they can send us something for our next board meeting. And then we could see if there is some tweaking that might need to happen. How do people feel about that?
I think I would very much like that. Just I do recall. Thank you, Steve, for clarifying too exactly where that actually comes from. And I recall you are right that was a very specific thing about where DDA funds had kind of slightly stepped on the Fire Protection District funds in the vote to form the DDA. I'm just reflecting on current fire situations up here, as well as current building code updates, as well as just inflation, cost of everything, and wondering does this board have an appetite to up that? So I would be very, very in favor of taking the 2021 end of year kind of budget, making that the baseline, but potentially even upping it by another 5,000, even if it's not used, just so that it's designated in the budget and that we know that we have that capacity should the need arise from the Netherland Fire Protection District.
So am I hearing 30,000? Would that be an amount maybe that we want to carve out, with knowing that's just kind of our ceiling? We don't have to go all the way there.
That's kind of what I would like. If we're putting a ceiling on the Big Springs project and on the wayfinding, I think that adding another $10,000 to what we provide the Netherland Fire Protection District as a ceiling is not a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, myself, I agree with that, Jonathan, too. And I think the board historically has always really supported the fire department. We realize how much in their hands we are with forest fires up here, and in addition to all the other good work they do. I was thinking like a 20% increase over our current budget would make it 30,000. And I don't, that seems like pretty big increase. Usually prices you don't see them going up 20% too often. But I would be okay with more than that if the rest of the board feels so. But my suggestion would be maybe like to add 20% to the 25,000, which would make it 30,000. But again, I'm not set on that number by any means.
I would be fine with 30,000.
For me, life safety and the climate change and updating of building codes, I'm comfortable going up to 40,000. So in any case, you're going to find me at the high end of the spectrum of funds for fire allocation.
Ron or Steve Roundtree or Danielle, did you have any questions or comments? Are you okay with the 30,000 amount, or is there another amount as Andrew had said?
I'm okay with 30,000.
I'm also okay with 30,000.
Same. I think 30,000 sounds reasonable.
All right. Thank you, everyone. The next questions I have, is there any website work that we wanted to do? This is really kind of a question for the communications committee. Is there more website work, or are we just kind of wrapping that up? So that's not going to be a project that we would undertake in 2022.
If we can just carry over what is available on the website, I think that would be perfect, and I think it will wrap up in 2022.
Okay, perfect. That's what I was assuming, but I just wanted to check in on that. And so the next category is event support. And typically, y'all have done about $5,550 a year. And this year, you're going to end the year with $4,550. So I've heard different numbers thrown out in our conversations, especially after Ned Dead. I'd heard people like having $5,000 a year, the $5,550,000 a year. I've also heard people want to up it to 10. So that's really the discussion there for event support.
I would like to carry over the $4,550 that's going to be there and add enough to it so that it is 10, so we can support a lot more events in town. That's a little less than $1,000 a month. And I think that next year we're going to have a lot more events and a lot more requests.
I agree. This is Danielle. I think that we're going to need to support events to help the morale in town, and especially outside events come next year summer. I like the idea of rounding it up to 10,000.
I agree. I agree with Barb, and that yes, morale and events are critical to where everybody's kind of hurting and frustrated, and the more events that we can have that bring us together as a community is important. So I support that.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Steve Roundtree?
I think 10,000 is great. I feel like the key to it might be the outreach of letting some mechanism of letting potential events know that the funds are there so that they're not unspent.
Absolutely.
And we're going to get to that pretty much right after this.
And Steve Carreau?
Yes, I agree with you, Barb, that I'm hopeful that next summer COVID will be, much more in control, and people we've seen have a real appetite for getting out and doing things. So I do see that this coming summer could be a really popular one for events. And I was also thinking about, I think it's in this meeting's agenda further on about the event questionnaire. And I think there was a recommendation for, maximum of $1,000 per event, with the stipulation that some events could have $1,000 for different projects within their event, perhaps. So it might be hard to spend all that, but I think having a placeholder again is a good way to go, and then we can, just field the applications as they come. And Steve Roundtree's suggestion is great to, have a way to broadcast that this money is available for projects that we deem valuable. So yeah, so I'm good with that. I think it's a little bit higher than we'll probably spend, but it's a placeholder, so I'm good with it. And real quick, sorry, just I was making notes here, but for the fire department, did we come up with 30,000 as an idea?
Yes.
Okay,
That's
cool.
what I have.
Great. I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Ron Mitchell.
As far as event support, I would like to see it be a little more specific and perhaps targeted at the additional police coverage that every event has to have. That way, each event would really receive an equal benefit from us. And I think that would be a worthwhile addition to the support. And I would certainly like to see that done. Comments?
I think there are a lot of events in town that don't need police support, so I'd rather not tag that on there. I realize that some of them do, maybe some of the farmers markets and parades and that kind of stuff, Dead Guy Days, but I think there are a lot of other events in town that don't require that. So I would like to leave it that it's up to the event, how they spend it. They have to tell us when they come to us anyways what they're going to use it for, and that is on the event application. So that is coming up shortly.
Okay, I really didn't make myself clear, Barbara. I'm sorry. That would be 4 events that are required to have the additional police protection. It wouldn't preclude any donation given to any other smaller event.
Okay.
I guess, could I ask some clarification there? I mean, most of our events do not require like specific police in terms of security. We require additional police support for specifically traffic control.
Yep.
As a DDA, anytime we have large events in town or simply busy weekends, I think anyone who has kind of paid attention on the days that we actually have a police officer or any type of maybe the mountain rangers directing traffic flow, specifically pedestrian flow across our state highways, that is actually a great benefit to the overall traffic flow through town. And that kind of trickles down into being a benefit to neighborhoods such as Big Springs, or I'm not Big Springs, Old Town, where when we have traffic backup, 3rd Street and Old Town are used as an attempt to cut through the traffic on the highway. The more traffic we have in town, the more backups you have in town, the less likely somebody is going to be to pull off and shop and to basically use our businesses in town, because let's be honest, Boulder is 20 minutes away, Estes is a half an hour away, Blackhawk is even 25 minutes away. And so if you've been sitting in traffic for 20 minutes and you were planning on getting lunch in Nederland, probably about the time that you hit 1st Street, you've had it and you can see the roundabout and you're done and you're going to go down to Boulder, which is not a benefit to our businesses. And a lot of the time that we have events, the hope is that it brings business into town as well as provides, morale and things to do for the locals. But I'm not actually against Ron's suggestion of earmarking these funds for event support, at least a portion of these funds specifically to traffic control. There's not so much of a parking issue in Ned in terms of the number of parking spots. What there is an issue of where the parking is and the fact that we have 2 state highways and a river running through town. And so our pedestrian flow often intermingles with our traffic flow through town in a less than ideal way for both residents and visitors. So I would just ask for comments on the rest of the board about the idea of maybe earmarking a percentage of that $1,000 per event specifically to cover mountain rangers or even help offset the cost of our local police department to put a traffic control officer on.
Well, I think that is a very good idea. I would concur with it and would modify my suggestion to where 2 of us are in agreement, at least at this point, that it's a good idea that that kind of traffic control, pedestrian particularly, it makes a lot of sense to me. And that's where I'd like to see the money go. Because again, I think that benefits the maximum number of businesses in terms of bang for the buck.
I can agree with that.
So just to clarify, for the event support, that assumes that the events that are larger that actually require that are going to come to us and ask us for money, where the event support originally started to support small events to help them grow, like the High Peaks Art Festival, which would require traffic control. And some of the other events that maybe need a little boost to get going. High Peaks might need a boost to get going this year. But that's assuming that the others will come to us. So what if we put in a line item that was traffic and police support, not contingent on the events, but in general, just like we do for the fire department? Why wouldn't we have a line item for that that said we're going to help the mounted rangers with 4 big events per year? My understanding is that it's somewhere around several $1,000s every time they come up here for the officer that has to be in charge of the Netherland side of things, if I remember what Larry Johns told us maybe a year ago. So would it be contingent on the events, or would it be something that we should add in as a traffic support? Maybe it even supports leaf season when it's really insane and we really need somebody out there helping with traffic and there's no event happening, but it's one of our busiest weekends of the year. Would it be worth putting that in as a separate line item, not event related?
I think that's a great idea, Barb.
So I have concerns with that just because of the lack of police officers we have. Like, we can't guarantee we can bring someone in for leaf keeper season, and a ranger can't work independently from an officer. Right. So I do caution not to tie up our already pretty strapped police department doing extra duty like that.
That is true.
I would just, wonder if it's a matter of, and I don't know about the legalities of this, but like a flagger, where on those. So yes, let me start out by saying I fully support just additional support on busy weekends so that, people, because I don't think, our traffic infrastructure is quite as developed as it could be yet. And if, for paying, coming up with a plan and, having a flag or assist, people getting in or out of, the shopping center or ACE, or, I think that's something that I could see that would be useful and subcontracted out to not a law enforcement body.
Could I ask a clarifying question of Miranda? Under our current IGA with Boulder County for policing, is that a potential that we could contract through the Boulder County Police Force and help assist paying for that extra officer through Boulder County? So we wouldn't be strapping our police force necessarily, but we might be able to get a part-time officer from Boulder County for those days.
So it's really tough because they're short-staffed as well. So I actually did ask that question recently when I met with them. And the answer was like, no, they have no people. And if Netherland wants them, you need to be paying rates similar to what Eldora pays for extra duty officers. And I don't know, Steve, if you want to share that number, but it's my understanding it's higher than their normal $65 rate plus travel time just to entice them to come. Is that right?
Do we have an IGA with the Gilpin County Sheriffs, and could that be something we could look into? Is Gilpin as short-staffed as Boulder County and us as well?
Sure. We don't have an IGA with them, but I'd be happy to reach out and see what that could look like.
We've lost 3 police or sheriff people in the last 2 months as well. We're super short-staffed in Gilpin.
So everyone's short-staffed. Okay, good to know.
Yeah, all of them.
Well, then if the police are short-staffed, flaggers are an alternative, and I think that makes some sense too, because in terms of particularly pedestrian control, uh, and it's an alternative that I think we really should consider. And as the discussion's gone along here, that makes the most sense so far. Thank you.
Is that something that someone would want to give a number or amount for the budget? Because that's what we need to figure out tonight.
I would like it to match the fire department budget of 30,000.
That could be a little steep. I would say match the event of 10,000, but I'm open to it being higher because I do believe that pedestrian assistance with controlling the flow of pedestrian crossing across the state highway would greatly benefit the business community and the community at large.
Well, and I still want money in there for the small events too that have totally different needs.
Well, I like Barb's idea of keeping event support where it's at, but adding an additional line item for traffic control.
Okay, then
particularly pedestrian flow.
Reduce that to 20,000 for traffic control, focused on flaggers.
I could agree with that.
This is Steve Perot. I don't know anything about the costs to do that kind of thing, but it just sounds like a lot of money for, you know, if we're talking about $10,000 or $20,000 on top of the 10,000 for event support. Sounds like an awful lot of money to me, but I don't know. I agree with Jonathan that it is a good value for the town in terms of easing congestion on the very busy days.
Again, we don't have to spend it all. It's a trial balloon, but I don't want to have to, like others have said, I don't want to have to go back to the board of trustees and ask for more if it's highly successful.
Yeah, I would agree, Steve. It is a large amount of money, and I would like to keep it down to like a 10,000, maybe even test run it at 5,000. But as Barb stated, we have from leaf peeping days to our high powder days, and we simply don't have the policing to put pedestrian, assistance and traffic flow assistance out there. And I would say on a very, very busy day, you have at least $5,000 to $10,000 worth of potential commerce drive right out of this town out of frustration, and nothing more than frustration. So while it might seem like 10,000 is a lot for this board, you might bring in that 10,000 in business revenue in one day, one busy day that you provide $1,000, $2,000 worth of pedestrian flow, and you also then are actively addressing the needs of the community and the complaints of the community about congestion. So one, it's a benefit to the community at large. Two, there's the potential that it could actually bring in a lot more business revenue simply by alleviating the congestion so that people are more apt to actually find a place to park instead of just being so frustrated because they've been backed up all the way up to the community center or well past the Shelf Road, sometimes all the way up. I know I work some days here on the weekends in town, and it can take me 45 minutes is the longest time to make it from literally 3rd Street over to McMillan. And 45 minutes for a drive that normally takes 5 minutes makes locals, one, very frustrated. Two, I couldn't imagine being a tourist who had planned to come in and have lunch at town, but then you spent 45 minutes trying to get to the traffic circle. By that point, you're hangry and you're pissed off and you're done. You're going to drive to somewhere that isn't so congested, where you don't have to spend a half an hour trying to get across town and then another 20 minutes trying to find parking. So I think it's a well worthwhile to throw $10,000 at, even if we don't use it and it carries over, just to simply as a test pilot, and we keep it outside of the event support, and we specifically say traffic flow, pedestrian flow support, because we recognize that our police in this county as a town, as well as in Gilpin County, are understaffed right now, and we all recognize a congestion and pedestrian flow problem within the town of Nederland.
So can we go down the list and see if that, what Jonathan's saying, 10,000 is agreeable for everyone? I believe Andrew already said that amount would be okay. Steve Roundtree?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of details that need to be
Yeah.
sorted out to put someone in a road doing traffic control. I know from efforts that we've made over the years that to do it the right way, it's a complicated process.
Definitely. So this would just be a line item to have it as the money will be available next year, and then we would have to come together as the board and figure out what that looks like, probably over the winter, so that by spring something was in place for at least larger days that come up after Memorial Day. Is the amount agreeable?
I sure would like to see you put 20,000 in, and then if we don't use it, and also, I think we're gonna need a new committee, or maybe the parking committee could work on this, to where we come back with a plan, a number of days, and flesh it out to where the board has a better idea of how many days, which days, and we would also approach the event, the 4 events, and talk to them. So, if that, I really think we need to, Jonathan made a lot of good points. The frustration that people do, the other thing that he didn't point out is that every business is interested in turnover. So if somebody's denied a place and they're frustrated, we lose them. If somebody has a parking place, they come in, they eat, they leave, and then another customer comes in. So it means that the businesses will have higher turnover. So I really encourage you to put the 20,000 in the budget and wait for the parking committee to come back and give you a plan. And if then you can say, no, we're going to take that. And even though the 20,000 is in the budget, we're only going to vote for 10,000 if the plan doesn't look like it's going to work. So I'm pleading with you because I agree. I've been out there for 15 years. I was the traffic director. I stood in the middle of 119 and First Street and directed the traffic and saw firsthand the frustration and the problems that Jonathan's outlined. So I understand your reluctance. It's a new item. Start small, but I must encourage you to please put 20,000 in. Thanks.
Okay, let's go around the circle with the idea of 20,000. Danielle?
I will agree with 20,000. I think this is a supplement to wayfinding, and it's a key point to helping our town keep people safe and keep business in town for us. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ron has said yes. And Jonathan, is that 20,000 agreeable?
I don't think it will be to the BOT, but I would agree to it as a first go for sure.
I agree with you, but we'll try it. Andrew?
Andrew, I accidentally muted you, so you're going to need to press *6 to come off. Sorry about that.
Okay, or either Steve, just on the 20,000.
Okay. Steve Rencher, you want to go?
I would agree to it.
And I've heard everything that people say, but I just have a hard time agreeing to 20,000. But I'm also the only one so far that isn't. So I'm happy to disagree and have it be in the budget that way. I just feel like it's a lot. So anyway, it seems like other people are in favor, so it can be put there.
Again, Steve, we may not spend it all. We'll come back with a plan for the days that we think we're going to need it.
Sure. Yeah.
And the cost per day. It'll be pretty detailed.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's all true, that it needs to have a real detailed plan and all that. And I realize this is just a placeholder. But for me, it just seems like it's too high of a placeholder, and especially when I'm thinking of like the fire department. I was a proponent of not giving them more money just because it seemed like a lot. I figured 20% was good for that. So I'm having a little bit of hard time, thinking that we should add 20,000 to a new category. But I do understand your points, and if it works out as planned, it could easily be worth it. But I don't feel good about it.
Okay, and Andrew? I think we.
Send him a text and I'm trying to invite him to unmute, but I'm not sure if he stepped away. But Andrew, you need to press *6 on your phone to unmute.
And he had
Does that
agreed.
work?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So all I was saying is, yes, I agree to the 20,000, and I think that, as the parking committee can come back with like identifying the key choke points where traffic is just horrible, that will be hugely helpful to making anyone's drive, be they a tourist or a local, through Nederland, just a lot easier. So that's all. Thank you.
All right. We have one last item before we can vote on the budget, and that is public art.
I would like the budget to have millions for public art. I would be very grateful if we could maintain 10,000, and then we will hope to not have to spend it all. We certainly spent some money on training, and the Ned Public Art Committee is going to be utilizing that training, and we will also be looking for committee members to join us that will help us be more organized with public communications, artist communications, budgeting, accounting, and such, and having the funding to make sure that we do it right. I believe this is something that will be similar to the Beautification Committee, and if we would agree to that, it would be wonderful. If we want a lower number, I would certainly still be grateful for that too. And of course, if we could go for millions, I would be ecstatic. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Danielle. What will the total cost be, including hiring the person that was helping us with public art to begin with, that doesn't, I suppose, have to help us moving forward, and the mural? What is that cost right now at? Kate or Danielle, do you know?
It's a 10,000.
Yeah, there
Okay.
you go.
That's where Danielle's saying that there'll
Yeah.
be some economies because we won't have the our contract with Carissa Samaniego, who really
Yeah.
helped the group and helped all of us set off. Now we have the wherewithal to do it ourselves, and we have an agreement, and so it achieved the goal. And it was a pleasure working with her. So hopefully we all got what we wanted out of that. But I think that that's where it could be 8,000. But but 10 works, just as well, just to make sure, because things could change, but I think Carissa's contract was about $2,000.
Okay. I'm fine with keeping it at 10,000 for next year. Andrew.
Yeah, I guess as far as the public art versus beautification and the mural, I'm trying to kind of think that what is the what is the difference?
Such a joke, babe.
What?
Public art is really the murals and the ideas of having art out in the town, and beautification is really planting and making sure the town looks beautiful. I would say a little bit more in the summertime than the rest of the year. But public art is a year-round process that
Okay,
is
yeah, I'm
growing.
sorry. I guess the mural up ahead, earlier on, I felt should have been folded into the public art. So I'm sorry to misconstrue with beautification, but as far as what is the current budget for public art?
10,000.
10,000. I'm a big supporter of the arts, and I'd given what the cost of paint is and inflation and materials. I think that knowing that as a contractor and getting price increases from paint vendors of 20 to 30%, 2 times a year over the last year. So I mean that's another factor. So I'm not saying to bump it 60%, but just that materials cost a lot more. So I would figure out. I would just say 30 to 40% for inflation should be added to public art.
Well, I think that's where keeping it steady at 10,000 was kind of the hope that, some of the places that we'll save, we could spend more on those areas as costs may arise, or there's other complications with the area that we need to put the mural up, things like that. So I think that's why there's the case for keeping it flat at 10,000.
What and okay, so I guess what is the 10,000 directly paying for?
Well, that's what Public Art Committee will tell us.
Yeah, similar to beautification, the money will be, the projects will come to the DDA to be approved. Maybe it will be some kind of ironwork or something different this year, or maybe there will be 10 small projects. There's no way of telling, but having that money there allows it to continue next year with some kind of project, and that is up to the Public Art Committee, and then they bring it to us. And that's Danielle and Rhea?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm in favor of keeping it the same or increasing it at a rate of inflation that we've all experienced over the last year.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And Steve Roundtree. You still there?
Yeah, I agree with it. 10,000 based on that conversation of potential savings of a couple $1,000s to open up some room in there. So I think 10,000 sounds good.
Great, thank you. And Steve Carreau.
Yes, I think 10,000 sounds good. And I also think that this is one of those line items that if we do really get rolling on it, it has such great, groundswell of support that if we had to go back to the BOT and up the budget next year because we had some really great projects going, I think this would be one of the easier ones to have adjusted for us because of all the great support and showing that we've had some successes at that point. So I think 10,000 sounds good, and hope that it gets rolling so much next year that we might want to increase it.
Agreed. Thanks, Steve. And Ron Mitchell.
I'm a great supporter of the arts and the flowers. I think they're 2 real important components of our mission. So I'm quite willing to keep that in the budget.
Great, thanks, Ron. And Jonathan.
Sorry, it took me a little bit to unmute. I am fully in support of the 10,000, and I think that is fairly reasonable. And if it gets rolling, I think next year we could discuss increasing this.
Great, thank you.
All
So
right, everyone.
Kate, yeah.
You did it. Now you just have
Kate?
to vote on it.
Hey, Kate, can you hear me?
If I could cut in, or Barb, just before we wrapped up, there was also a question about any other projects that aren't, on this
Yeah.
list that we might want to talk about. And I know Ron Mitchell has said, that our funds are really tight and inflation is going to eat up a lot of our already committed projects. But I just wanted to bring up the point of the, I don't know what it's called, but like the Gateway Park, if there was any interest from the board in having any budget line item for any work that we might be able to do next year on that. Because I know that Tanya at the BOT, is really on board with trying to get things rolling forward with that. So I just wanted to bring that up, not that we, even need to address it, but just so we didn't not address it.
So I'll let you know, just so that you guys have an idea of where you stand. All of your budget items that you just talked over for 2022 comes to a total of 510,000. So you have 436,000, that you could still potentially be talking about. I know you're not going to get all there, but I just wanted to give you an idea of where you were with your budget and your money.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, that's what I thought too, is that we're kind of on the low side.
We will also have stuff come forward from town, from Public Works.
Absolutely.
And other projects. So allowing that to kind of sit there without being budgeted is also okay as other projects come forward, because then we just go back to the board and including Gateway Park, which would be great to talk about, but I don't know that we have any firm plans on starting something next year on that, as I think they'll be kind of wrapping up the GoCo stuff there. Jonathan might know more about that specifically, but we don't have any plan right now to tackle that.
And Kate, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? This is Rita.
Yes.
I also wanted to bring up, I do see another project that was in the 2021 budget. I'm not sure, it was called Lakeview for 25,000. So I'm not sure if that's something that you guys are wanting to discuss in the 2022 budget.
Ron would probably
Thanks, Rita.
know. Ron would probably know more about that, but I think that we decided to focus on Big Springs first.
That's correct. This was improvements for parking on Lakeview, and there was a lot of opposition because it would take out some trees along the north side of the parking lot for the shopping center. And we just had so much on our plate that we felt we should abandon that item. And so we did.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you. And is there any public comment on the budget? Nope. Hearing none, since this is, let's see, since this is an action item, we actually need to bring it into a vote. So do I have anyone that wants to bring that forward?
I move that we approve the budget as we have discussed it this evening.
I second that.
And Kate, can you call the roll?
I'd be happy to. Steve Carell?
Yes.
Barb Hart?
Yes.
Andrew Duarte?
Yes.
Ron Mitchell?
Yes.
Danielle Kraus?
Yes.
Steve Roundtree?
Yes.
Jonathan Baumhover?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Great.
Thank you, Kate. That was awesome. Really appreciate everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Good meeting.
The next action item is the grant application. This is actually coming back after we had a discussion on it last time. I don't know if anyone has any further questions on it. This was brought forward by Claudia last year. And this is where it goes into that event idea that they can ask for, event organizers can ask for, somewhere between $250 or $1,000 with a cap of $1,000. And we just want to approve this so that we can start offering those out to the event organizers, possibly still for this year, but definitely for next year. Does anyone have any questions about this beyond what we discussed last month?
Yes, but this is Steve Carreau. In looking at the second of the middle attachment on our agenda, it's the NDDA Fund Request Guidelines. It's called the NDDA Special Event Fund for the link. But on that document, I was wondering about 2/3 of the way down the page, it says the maximum amount awarded will be 1,000 per request. And then the next sentence says festivals/events can request funding for more than one project per festival or event. And I was just curious if, I know Claudia was the one who basically drafted this, but does anyone know what the thinking was for that or what an example might be? And I'm just concerned about it because it seems like it might open the door to, potentially just trying to game the system and, coming up with different sub projects for an event that, and obviously we would get to vote on it. So we might say, no, that doesn't sound good to us. But I was just curious what that means and why it's in there.
Since I didn't draft it, I'm really not sure what specifically she was thinking of there, and I would be fine with removing that. I think that 1,000 per event, when we have 10,000 in our total budget, is plenty.
And also, I suppose, during that back and forth with the questionnaire, if it was a really serious event that we wanted to support, well, no, I guess if it's 1,000, it's 1,000. So never mind with that idea.
But we might support them with parking now that we have set aside some parking funds as well. So there might be other ways the DDA can support them without, an outright amount over $1,000, which would at least give, if it was $1,000, it would at least give possibly 10 events an opportunity.
Right. Yeah, and I like that because of that additional fund we just created. And then the other thing I just wanted to make a point about is if there is any way for us to, add it to our guidelines for how we will assess these events, I think it would be awesome if we could come up with, giving priority to money that we would pay on behalf of the event coordinators, but the money would be paid to another company within town. So that just keeps the money in and it, increases its velocity within the town. And so we get, sort of two benefits. We benefit two different groups with that one giving. So just a thought for as we develop this more, if there is a way to, weight it or give priority to the $1,000 going toward other businesses who are in town that can help support that event, as opposed to, paying a company from Wyoming or something.
Sure. I think that would definitely be possible. And again, they have to come to us with the application completely filled out and tell us how they're going to spend it. So knowing that we want to promote local business, I don't think there's any question that we would say, yes, but are you hiring someone local to do this? That would definitely be something we would want to mention.
Sure. Or if there is any way to earmark the money that we give them, for out of their application, saying like if they're going to be buying 1,000 muffins from the New Moon, that we would pay $1,000 to New Moon for that or something, because that way it would, it's all money that's being spent. But if we make sure that the money we're providing is going to a town entity or helping the town directly, then maybe that frees up a little more money for that group to spend on something else.
Right. And we want this to all be local events that are coming to us, like not the Buffalo Classic at a Boulder or something that are coming to us. So we want it to be things that are drawing people here to spend their money in town, which will in turn also help the economy of the town. So that was definitely all discussed a year ago when we first started talking about all of this with Claudia.
Right, that it would benefit the town. And assessing it on that front. There's one other thing in this guidelines that I caught my eye at the very bottom bullet point on the first page, where it says priority will be given to fund requests that demonstrate a financial gain to downtown businesses in the town of Nederland. And then it says that can be in the form of an increasing sales or improving access to residents and visitors within the DDA business district. I wasn't sure, again, Claudia is the one who did it, but I'm not sure what she meant by that. And it sounded like it's kind of, we'd rather have a more open-ended sentence than just saying it could be this or that, end of bullet point.
Which page is this on? The one?
This on the bottom of that first page of the NDDA fund request guidelines. And it's a bullet point.
Priority will be given.
Yeah. So the last part of that second sentence in there, it just seemed like she was saying two things that it, would be considered. And I didn't even understand what that second one meant.
I think it really is given to downtown businesses within the town of Nederland. I'm not sure where the residents part comes in. Improving access to residents. That's going back to parking, which is a whole different thing now.
Right. So I don't, yeah.
Traffic. So, yeah, I'm not really sure. Kate, is that something that we can remove that line?
Yeah, we can edit that out.
Okay.
Just like the other requests that Steve had to clarify.
Yeah, because the first sentence in there, I think, captures the essence of what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then one more thing. Sorry, I've got so much. I just was reading it. On the second page, the next bullet point, it says any event must take place within the NDDA boundaries and must allow businesses and residents within the district to participate. The second part of that, I'm thinking of like the Ned, which, so maybe this could be a little broader because that goes up through West Magnolia and all up the Eldora Road, but it does start in the business district, because Teens Inc. is within the district. So it's not wholly contained within there. But, for something like the Ned, what would it mean to allow businesses and residents within the district to participate that it must allow? Is that just meaning they don't want an exclusionary event?
I think that one is a little confusing anyways, because within the NDDA boundaries means that we can't fund anything ever that might be held at the community center.
Right. That was the other thought I had, is I think that's just too narrow. I mean,
yeah, I think within town limits and open to the public. Would that make more sense?
I kind of like that more, because I think that might have been what she meant with the must allow businesses and residents to participate.
Yeah.
That's not, that it is a public event. So I think that's good wording.
Right. Like somebody's not having a farm to table event that's only by purchasing a ticket or something. I like within the town of Nederland and open to the public. Miranda, there's no issue with that as far as it being NDDA versus town, is there?
I don't think so.
Okay.
The funds by statute have to be expended within the bounds of the DDA. It's in the statute.
So it can't be something at the community center. But the Ned starts in town and ends in town. And like the bike race started in town and ended in town.
Mm-hmm.
But you couldn't fund art at the center?
Doesn't the bullet point, the first bullet point, taking out the second sentence, the priority will be given, that takes care of that component. And then the second one, it's like at the beginning of it's a duplicate talking about the boundaries, right? Like the point of the next bullet point is really, instead of talking about where it's taking place, the focus should be on that it's open to allow businesses and residents, that it's an open event to participate, but delete the first half of that out. It's a duplicate to the prior bullet point.
It could be open, just basically the second bullet point could be just open to the public,
Yeah.
That's open to the public.
And then it's hitting the prior bullet point takes care of the location of it. And this one refers to it being open. And it feels like that gets the important pieces there.
Okay.
And then my last one on this document was the next bullet point where it said acceptable uses of funding include. And I was thinking it might be a good idea to say include but not limited to, because I'm sure there's things besides these few items that it could include. Just so we're not bottlenecking ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. It could be used for so many different things.
Yeah, so I mean, I take that to be just like ideas of how it might be used, but not
So,
that it should be limited to only those ideas.
okay.
Thanks. That was all my comments on this one.
Thanks, Steve.
Sure.
Does anyone else have a comment or suggestion on this one? Andrew?
We're still talking about any event must take place within the NEA boundaries and must allow businesses and residents within the district to participate.
Just the overall form. We're making the changes that Steve suggested now, taking out the second sentence of that one bullet point and just rewording the bullet points.
Yeah, no, I support that. Yep.
Okay. And Steve Roundtree?
Yeah, I think it's good. Thank you, Steve, for driving that conversation.
Okay, and Danielle?
Agreed. This looks good. Thank you for the changes and bringing this forward.
Yeah, and Ron Mitchell?
I'm fine with it.
Okay, and Jonathan?
I'm in agreement.
Great. Since this is an action item, can I hear a motion for the grant application approval with the modifications made?
I think there's a bit too many words and it's getting late. Can we, I make a motion that we approve this, but I'm falling short on the right words.
With the suggested modifications?
So moved.
Second? Kate, can you call the roll?
Steve Carreau,
Yes.
Barb Hart,
Yes?
Andrew Duarte,
Yes.
Ron Mitchell,
Yes.
Danielle Kraus,
Yes.
Steve Roundtree,
Yes.
Jonathan Baumhover.
Yes.
Great, and that brings us to the next action item, which is the banking resolutions. And Kate is going to introduce that.
So this is pretty straightforward. Now that we have a new executive director, me, a new board chair, Barb, and a new vice chair, Andrew, we need to change the signature authority at our banks, Sunflower and Citywide Bank. So I prepared to you, Ron did the due diligence, and they need our meeting minutes and a unanimous vote from the board that states that from now on, we're the ones that have signature authority and we're the only authorized signers, and any combination of the two of us shall be sufficient for authorizing disbursements. So that's what we have for you this evening. Does anybody have any questions? All right.
Yeah.
Since this is an action item, we will need you to vote on it so that it can be recorded from the minutes. And after this is done, both Barb and Andrew will sign it and we'll seal it and we'll get it to the bank.
Great, thank you. Can someone make a motion for this one?
We actually need two motions, one for each bank.
Oh, okay.
Motion to approve Barbara Hart and Andrew Duarte as the bank signers for Citywide Banks.
We got to include all four people.
Oh,
my bad. Oh, motion to approve Barbara Hart, Andrew Duarte, Vice Chair Ron Mitchell, and Kate Massengale as the authorized signers for Citywide Banks.
Could we just make a new motion without that one vice chair thing there, just in case the protest?
That was a verbal slip up because of late. So motion to approve Barbara Hart, Andrew Duarte, Ron Mitchell, and Kate Massengale as the authorized signers for Citywide Banks.
Second that motion.
And
Second.
Kate, can you take the roll?
Steve Carell,
Yes.
Barb Hart,
Yes?
Andrew Duarte,
Yes.
Ron Mitchell,
Yes.
Daniel Kraus,
Yes.
Steve Roundtree,
Yes.
Jonathan Baumhover.
Yes. Motion to approve Barbara Hart, Andrew Duarte, Ron Mitchell, and Kate Massengale as the authorized signers for sunflower banks.
Second that motion.
And Kate, can you take the roll?
Steve Carell,
Yes.
Barb Hart,
Yes?
Andrew Duarte,
Yes.
Ron Mitchell,
Yes.
Danielle Kraus,
Yes.
Steve Roundtree,
Yes.
Jonathan Baumhover.
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right. We still have, let's see, informational items, chair reports, treasurer's report. I have no chair reports, and I'm wondering if we should skip chair reports this evening. I think we need to get down to these last discussion items, and we're at 8:45. So Kate, what is our option, or Miranda, what is our option here for moving to, let's see, Lindsay's been sticking with us for hours, and we have a discussion we need to have there. Can we?
I would recommend maybe pulling the board and just seeing how everyone's feeling, and if you feel like you can keep moving through this, and maybe that includes Trustee Danforth, how she's feeling in terms of the reports. I would say, like you noted, people can read the ones that are in the packet, and maybe then everyone does their own committee reports next month. But I would be curious. I know a lot of people on this call were also part of last night's really late Board of Trustees meeting, and so I'm not sure how people are feeling.
Okay.
This is Steve Carell, and I would make a motion to move on to discussion items and pass over the informational items for tonight, if that's allowed.
Second.
Great, Kate, do you want to, is everyone in agreement? Do we need to do a roll?
Yeah. In agreement.
Could say all those in favor, say aye.
All those,
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Great, let's go down to the next discussion item, and that is the,
So this item has changed quite a bit since we first put it out yesterday. Our attorney, Paul Benedetti, was not able to be with us this evening. And so he was able to answer a few questions we had around the questions that have been coming up about how the Board of Trustees and how our board of the NDDA can best work together. And so the question, and basically his answers were, there's a lot of conflict, and that the law is vague in a lot of areas and conflicts in a lot of areas as well. So there's no straight answer. And his suggestion, and what he has found working with other municipalities and DDAs, is that coming together and having a working agreement of when you check in with each other and how you work together is really kind of the best practice now of how to move forward. And Steve and Barbara were on these emails as well, so please jump in. I'm just kind of giving the high level, trying to respect everyone's time. So one of our thoughts was to be able to gather any questions people have so that we could continue to work with our attorney. There's also the desire for wondering, how do people feel about coming together and having a work session and drafting an agreement with how the Board of Trustees and the DDA would work together. So those are the things that we kind of wanted you to consider tonight. And as also part of this agenda item, there is some information that was requested by Trustee Danforth about the CD purchase that occurred. And we put together a little background for the board so that you would understand what our response was going to be on that item. And if you had any other items to add, we've got that in there for you to look at. And it also includes the agendas where that CD purchase was discussed. So that was a whole lot of information in a very small amount of time. And so I'm happy to answer any questions or just kind of facilitate discussion, whatever you need right now.
Well, in some cases where there is no ambiguity in the statute, there are two citations for the handling of funds. And in the section 3125-808 in the Colorado Revised Statute, titled Additional Supplemental Powers Given to the Downtown Development Authority, under I, parentheses H, and then Roman numeral 1, it says that there are A through H purposes on this page, and it says one of the supplemental powers for the DDA is to invest funds of the authority not required for immediate disbursement in property or securities in which public bodies may invest subject to another state statute. So that's fairly clear. And then further on I, it also repeats this, that the DDA would be able to borrow money on such items and conditions as the board may approve, meaning the DDA board, and to issue bills, bonds, notes, and evidence of other indebtedness, and to pledge and hypothecate property or revenue in support of such debt. That's fairly clear. And so that's where we operated from in terms of setting up and buying a certificate of deposit, that we are allowed to invest our funds by the statute and under that particular section. And this was presented to the board at 3 different occasions. I believe Steve emailed me the exact ones, and I'd just like to, and I didn't see or have a chance to review what you had put together, Kate, so that's why I wanted to make this quick and short presentation. So Steve, would you like to give the report on the board meetings? And I believe the board voted unanimously to go ahead and purchase the CD. And also at the same time, so that we could liquefy the funds if we needed to, we established a line of credit using the certificate of deposit as the backing for the line of credit. This gives us the ability to establish commercial credit in the business community and be able to have an extension of money when we need to borrow money. We can borrow it through this quirk in the law. Not actually a quirk, it makes a lot of sense, except our DDA didn't develop and function like the average DDA does. So for us, it's a little bit of an anomaly, but we have to borrow the monies when we do a project and then pay it back. Since we have the cash for most of these projects now, we just simply borrow the money one day and pay it back the next. And this arrangement allows us to do that and get that housekeeping out of the way very quickly. And I think I explained that during those meetings before we bought the certificate of deposit. So I'm through.
Yeah, thanks. If I could chime in, this is Steve Carew, and I was chair of the NDDA during this time. So I think we're dealing with 2 separate but related issues here tonight. So just to pick up where Ron left off, the one issue I think was that the Board of Trustees was wanting to get more clarity about how this CD came about, the purchase of the CD. And I think Ron did a really good job right there of essentially discussing the details and the legality of it. It is one of the rights of the DDA, I believe, from reading that Colorado statute. But I think the more important thing was that the Board of Trustees wanted to make sure that proper protocol was followed. And I feel very strongly that it was followed to a T. this item was brought up. First of all, the timeline is important because it was brought up before we even started talking about having an investment policy. That was something that sort of came out of this. So I think it's important for the Board of Trustees to realize that the purchasing the CD was the first step and had nothing to do with an investment policy. We hadn't even broached that topic yet. So first, Ron came as a discussion item, and I was the chair, so I was talking to him before meetings and grilling him a little bit and making sure that he had enough information in the packets to bring this. So it was first brought up, I believe it was in November. Actually, here I've got the notes. November 10th meeting, and he brought it up as a discussion item. And I remember that I was kind of questioning Ron because it was a net loss of 0.25%, and so it wasn't helping us in terms of interest. But his point was that it was to establish the commercial credit, and so we ended up discussing it on that level. And even though it's going to cost us 0.25% in interest, it would be worth it because we had just recently filed for our own EIN, employer identification number, which establishes us as our own corporate entity. And so the board felt it was important to start establishing commercial credit, as Ron mentioned earlier. So that's the one part that it was brought up as a discussion. The board discussed it, and my recollection is we wanted to get a little more clarity and a little more information from Ron, and we directed him to do that before the next meeting. And then it was on the December 9th meeting when it was brought back as an action item, and we discussed again about the value of commercial credit, establishing that versus the paying the 0.25%, and that comes from the CD itself would be earning 0.75% annually, and the cost for the line of credit was 1%. So that's how I'm getting that negative 0.25%. But anyway, for purposes of what the Board of Trustees, what I understand they were looking for here, I think this matter was very clear and brought up as a discussion item first, fully discussed, then brought back the next month as an action item. And I actually have my notes from being the chair of that meeting, and it was voted unanimously. I keep notes of all the votes, but obviously that's in the public record as well. So in any case, I wasn't involved with anything having to do with the Board of Trustees questioning this. So I don't know exactly if there's any other questions that they had, but I'd be happy to address those. But I think just on the bare facts of it, it's was on the up and up and was very straightforward. So I don't feel like there was anything at all wrong doing about it. And if Trustee Danforth is on the call, I'd be happy to answer any questions too. Didn't see her name here. Oh yeah, Lindsay, I see you.
Yeah, hi, I'm here.
Oh great, good. I hadn't seen you, so I was hoping you were still on. Thank you for waiting.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys, putting so much effort into, doing all the research on this and providing the documentation. I've read through all of this, and I've reached out to some financial advisors and talked to them as well, kind of regarding this. I think my main concern is not that this was done, right? Like that the ability of the DDA to purchase a CD in this amount is certainly legal under, Colorado law. I think where my concern has come into play here is that we're doing it with the knowledge of a loss. And that loss to build credit doesn't seem to be necessary. Considering that you guys have not only that $250,000, but you have, what is it, a total of $700,000 in cash that's available to you guys. So that would be enough backing for anything you would need, any kind of loans against that. So it feels like that purchase of the letter of credit, paying that fee, is unnecessary in this circumstance, that there is no need for that, that you guys could invest that $250,000 in a CD without the letter of credit, considering the amount of cash that you guys have available at your disposal that can be released to you as a loan from the city, from the town. So that's where I'm just questioning how the letter of credit came about, and if that portion of it, based on my understanding of Colorado law, was that we can't knowingly go into negative territory. You know, there's a lot of legal jargon in there about risk and mitigating risk and you know, things like that, but there's nothing in there that says that we can knowingly go into a negative territory. And so I'm curious as to why that decision was made, and if any other financial advisors were involved in this decision to open a letter of credit rather than using the town as, you know, our backer.
Yeah, Lindsay, that I can understand your concern on the surface of that. A couple points.
Let me explain something very quickly.
Okay.
There's a big difference between a letter of credit and a line of credit, and this is a line of credit.
Okay, I might have misspoke then. A line of credit then, being able to use that as liquidity, right? Rather than waiting for our CD to mature. Because if we were to sell the CD before its maturity date, we'd pay a fee, right? And so the line of credit is our ability to borrow that against the CD. So the CD is our securable for the line of credit, right?
Well,
the CD is the security for the line of credit, yes.
Yeah.
And
which, you know, seems to me, it seems unnecessary, right? That $250,000 is still available from your available funds at this point. So we're losing money unnecessarily is how it appears to me. And I just based on what I've read with the Colorado law, I worry that this puts us at risk because we're knowingly losing taxpayer money. So I don't want us to be out there and at risk for doing anything that hasn't been reviewed, I think, by a third party.
Lindsay, yeah, let me respond to that because I think that's, it's a good point, and I can see your view of it, from where you are. But what was happening at the time was that we were going in, we were planning that we had our funds, pretty much all of our funds spoken for, except for this, slightly more than the 250,000. And I remember this is just from memory, but in those discussions, at the discussion item and then in the action item, the point was that we really felt at that time that we might be going into this current year with spending, we had all these funds allocated, for town matching funds and the TIP project and all that we were just assuming we're going to be moving forward in this current year. And so I remember that we didn't want to, we really wanted to have that liquidity. And that's where that line of credit was coming in from. It's because I know I personally really felt like we were going to be close to the bone for this year in terms of all that we had committed to spending with town. And it turns out at least one of the projects didn't even come through, but we had matched, that's like $70,000 right there that we had matched. And there was another one that was going to be, I think, well, we had I can't remember the amounts, but there was another one that was over 100,000 that we would have had to pay to the town public works had they gotten a grant and started the work. So it really came from the feeling that we were basically committed to the max, but we wanted to, we were trying to get this CD, and then the whole point about having liquidity came up. And I see your point that, perhaps we could borrow the money from town if we needed it, or, somehow, some other way, to have collateral to borrow money. And really that hadn't occurred to me during those two meetings. So I was thinking that we needed this liquidity because we were so close to our all of our revenue stream for this coming year and all that. So that's where that came from. It wasn't, and then the other thing I think about is I feel like that 1/4% is, at least in my mind, and I'm a business person, so I think this way. For me, it was the cost of establishing that credit as well, because that during, at least in the second meeting, came up, that we have this new corporate entity that we've just established and we have no credit. We have basically no history with this new EIN. And so I remember Ron had mentioned that would be, a good way to start establishing commercial credit. And I do remember Karen Garrity on that call, on that meeting, chiming in, and saying, oh, that is a good point to try to establish that commercial credit. So at least the town administrator on that meeting saying that she approved of that idea.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of trying to establish credit, as a business owner, it's because you intend to go into debt and securing debts. But I'm not sure that that's.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in? Can I just jump in here, Andrew? Is just that, being in the position we were in, we want to establish credit when we don't need it. Just that is kind of, I think, the golden rule of credit is that you want to be able to get as much credit as you can when you don't need it, because who knows what's going to happen in the future. Not that we, are intending to run anything off the rails, but just that no one will give you credit when you actually need it.
There's
Right.
another point I would like to address here, Andrew. The idea that a line of credit is only established when you are intending to going into debt as a business owner is actually completely incorrect. Specific to, let's say, construction, contracting, and mostly any contractor firm, whether it's construction, artists, or any of that, a lot of the times those payments are contingent upon bank draws, and bank draws are contingent upon invoices, timeliness, accounting, and all of that. Now, a line of credit allows you to pay out your contracted fees on a timely basis while you are still waiting for bank draws. So the idea that a line of credit is only used when you're intending to go into debt is actually not a business understanding. That is a personal, private understanding of credit. Credit is used by individuals when they are intending to go into debt, or when they do not have enough money to purchase a house and therefore they get the credit, get a loan, and go into debt. From a business perspective, having a line of credit provides you with more opportunity as well as more flexibility to deal with cash flow issues. Now, as Steve said, we were at that time projected to be pretty close to our cash flow, and there was questions about when are these grants going to call in these necessary payments? And will we have collected our business revenue at that point? And we didn't have answers to these questions because we had approved conditionally matching grants that had unknown timeframes at that point, unknown dictates. And so we felt it necessary to provide those
total costs also.
What was that, Ron?
They had unknown total costs. Our commitment in terms of percent, not in terms of an absolute dollar value, was an open-ended deal that
Correct.
we were locked into.
So we had a need to establish a line of credit to provide the DDA with the ability to work with all of these unknowns. Secondly, I would agree Colorado state law does not allow you to go into the negative, but taking a 1/4% hit on potential the overall was not the DDA going into the negative. We in no way went into the red. We were still well within the black. So I guess
Can I just say it would be like the difference between the use of credit and the establishment of credit?
one, it was the establishment of credit. Two, there was a need and an understanding, I felt like, in the discussions of the DDA to have an established line of credit. And so taking the 0.25% hit was an acceptable means to establish a line of credit so that in the future, and should we get into a scenario where we had allocated money with open-ended unknown timelines, we had a mechanism and a means to be able to pay out those contracts on a timely basis.
Yes,
The DDA is statutorily created as a corporation that can take on debt. It can have losses. It's in the statute. You can make loans, and loans are often not repaid. There are defaults. That would be a loss, and the loss would be putting the understanding would be that the entire position of the DDA would be a negative one. The entire position of the DDA is very positive, $900,000 in the bank.
Great. And I mean, that to me, because of that, the amount of money that we have, the line of credit seems like an unnecessary loss. And I'm not 100% sure, I haven't seen or read everything related to a downtown development association, so I don't know all the ins and outs of it clearly. I think, my concern is just the optics of choosing to lose money prior to having any of this money called for. Because I don't think paying for and establishing a line of credit that's backed by a CD is something that you have to set up months and months or years in advance. It's something like, oops, we see this coming, let's go ahead and establish that if we need to. But it seems like an unnecessary loss of taxpayer money. And I just don't like, personally, I don't like the optics of that. And, establishing a line of credit, I think there's probably other avenues in which to do that.
Could we make a clarification that it's not taxpayer money, that it's business tax money, and there's a difference between taxpayer money and business tax money, and I think that needs to be clarified between the DDA and the BOT, because I have heard this come up before in comments from Trustee Combs Ismail about how this is taxpayer dollars. Well, they're business taxes, and those business owners choose to run a business, and as business owners then pay a business tax on top of the taxes that they pay as citizens. So business taxes versus taxpayer dollars should be very carefully worded in terms of terminology and ideology.
I appreciate the clarification.
I must say this minor, maybe $200 loss or $400, I'm not sure what it is, but we can calculate it. If we roll the CD over, there will be no fee that was paid to start it, and we will be in the black as far as the CD is concerned, because the interest at that time will have made up the difference in what the $1,500 cost was to establish the line of credit.
Thanks, Ron, for that information. Can I just say real quickly, because we could probably go hours talking about this particular topic. I think that what we need to do is get scheduled with our attorney and get a work session where we can kind of hammer this out more. We can't go backwards from where we are. We understand there were some questions about how this came about, which a lot of them have been answered how it came about. So could we think about scheduling a work session with our attorney and the DDA board, and of course Trustee Danforth and anybody else that wanted to come to it to listen at a work session, although you can't participate if I remember correctly, so that we can move forward with what we need to do next. Obviously we have still a couple of things on the agenda this evening, and I don't know if we need to address them this evening or not, but I do know that we need to realize that this is something that we should talk about more extensively, and it's something that we won't be making a decision out of, so we could do it at a work session in the future. And I wonder if that's something everyone would be agreeable to. With that being said, I'm not sure whether or not, I know Kate's planning to go to the BOT meeting to discuss this at the next meeting, but I even wonder if we want to put that off for just a few weeks or a month until we can have that work session and really hammer down exactly what we want to do in the future and how we want to answer these questions. Does that make sense?
I would only support having our attorney at the meeting if the Board of Trustees sees fit to do that. The Board of Trustees should pay our attorney to be there. I don't feel that it's a necessary expense that we should go to. The statute is clear. We had the authority to do it. Ms. Danforth's opinion is certainly hers, and she's certainly entitled to it. But I feel we as a board made our own decision. We were entitled to make it. And I don't see that we should fund the expense because she objects.
So Ron, I think the intent of the work session is really more about how we can all work together and understandings about how we move forward and communicate. And part of Paul Benedetti, our attorney's reason for that opinion is that where it seems clear in the statute, then there'll be another section about municipal duties that kind of contradicts other pieces. And those were his concerns. And so that's why his thought was that a working agreement between us and the BOT would be best practice in how our organizations could move forward. So I think that that's more what the intent with the work session is it's not so much to continue to go over the CD purchase as it's about how are we going to move forward and we each understand where the other is, what the other is doing and why, and when we check in with each other and where we have our leeway to do what we need to do as a board. I think that that's really what has come up as the conversation.
I absolutely agree.
I just want to put the CD line of credit thing to bed here and now.
I mean, I'm certainly not interested in talking about the CD for hours and hours because, Ron is correct that they had the ability to make the investments. I think that the idea is to move forward, I think, and, we've had discussions with the BOT about investment policies and investing only in banks that don't invest in oil and gas. And, we made our desires clear, but I think it's unclear as to what the weight is of the BOT's decisions, and how we want to participate in this. We've talked about it. There was the last I remember and the last I could find in the meetings was that the DDA would come back to us with a final version of the investment policy that included our desire to not invest in oil and gas and
we did that.
Other kind of minor stipulations.
That was approved by the BOT
last month. Yeah, at last month's meeting. That was
I think maybe Trustee Danforth wasn't there.
I may not have been there.
Yeah, because that was approved. But just to go back to Paul Benedetti moving forward, really having an agreement with a working agreement with the BOT is so important to us because we do work hand in hand on so many of these things. And I think that the work session is a way that we can accomplish that. And if Kate's going to bring back the other answers to the BOT as well, which we do need to do because they asked us to.
It's requested.
It's requested, so that needs to still happen. Then let's focus on having a work session on how we work moving forward with the Board of Trustees and what their expectations are and what our expectations are.
Would this be just a DDA work session or a joint work session?
I think joint would be good.
I think joint would be the most effective.
Yeah, instead of going back and forth.
The Board of Trustees did express interest in starting to do more of those with different boards and commissions. And so I don't want to speak for Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer and Trustee Danforth, but I have a feeling that there is support in doing that.
I think there's an interest in doing it, and I can agree to that. I think that more information needs to be provided to the BOT about mutual funds and about how those mutual funds are broken out, and about the state statutes of the DDA being able to invest only in certain mutual funds. And I would challenge members of the BOT that would desire not to have any investments in oil or gas or weapons or that yada yada to provide me with a mutual fund that isn't diversified in having some of those investments, being that they are key economic industries in not only this country, but the global economy. I would also challenge the BOT to look at a zero cost analysis and maybe look at what goes into building solar panels, wind turbines, because a lot of petro products, oil and gas, are necessary in the production of these products. So I would challenge the BOT members requesting a surface level of, let's put a show of we're against natural gas and we're against oil, to look at the reality on the ground of what actually exists in terms of industry and production from a zero bottom line. So I'm happy to have this work session, and I will speak to the rest of the DDA that I feel as your liaison that this board did everything right. And I expressed at that BOT meeting as a BOT member that I felt like there was an undue desire to control the DDA board and to micromanage things down to minute details that largely actually aren't in the benefit of the town, nor of the BOT's time, nor of the DDA's time to debate and try to create agreements that are, for better or worse, only for show and have nothing to do with the functionality of the DDA as a board that helps to develop infrastructure, nor of the BOT as the overall guiding board of this town, which is supposed to focus on the overall health and well-being of the community. So that's just my personal thoughts. I'm happy to have this meeting, but I really don't feel like it's going to go any further than the last 4 hour-long discussions regarding this has gone. Overall, yeah, we might have lost 1,500 on establishing a line of credit, but we also just spent, 5,000 this year on annuals that died. So there has to be at some level, I guess, a reality check is how I feel as a BOT member.
Yeah, and I think, I don't want to micromanage the DDA, and that's certainly not my intention. I think just trying to make sure that everything that's done is on the up and up, is to have things reviewed by, investments reviewed by a lawyer or by a financial analyst who can verify that, yep, exactly what's being done is on the up and up. Because I don't think any of us come to the table with any kind of certification on investments like that. So I think personally I would feel better if there was a tad bit more oversight, I think, on investments. And I don't think the BOT is qualified to do that, but I'd love to see, somebody with the expertise to be able to do that.
Well, I feel I have a certain amount of expertise in this area, and so that's why I volunteered to be the treasurer. If you're asking for the DDA to hire yet another attorney to supervise me, I don't think you'll get there.
Well, and I would just add, we have Dana Edwards, who has, I think, made it clear that what we're talking about is CDs at this point, and not mutual funds. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that was my understanding. Is
I
that,
believe you're right, Stuart. I was simply implying that any investments
Yeah.
allowed under state statute are going to be diversified to such an extent that to cut out oil and gas might not be a plausible reality as much as an ideological desire.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And so I guess if, if the intent is to make a motion for a joint work session between the BOT and the DDA to discuss, as you said, Jonathan, something that's been discussed again and again and again, I don't know if that is in anyone's interest. I think, clarifying what and reading what the investment policy that Dana Edwards already created and that we've been following is something that, again, I feel, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I don't want to. If you're, go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, it was just that I feel that there is a perception that the creation of a CD, this line of credit that is not a mutual fund. It's basically earning slightly more, not slightly more. I think around $1,000 or $2,000 more a year instead of $100 a year. I mean, that's what we were trying to go for, I believe, was the intent. And we're not talking about investing in mutual funds or any other things that have levels of risk beyond a CD.
And the investment policy as it stands now is so restrictive, it's not worth my while to go out and try and find an investment that pays 0.02% more than what we're getting in the CD.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that people don't want to continue to have the same conversation. And that is, from my perspective, that's not what the work session is meant to be. What I would like to do, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is reach out to our attorney and get a better idea of what he would, an agenda for what that meeting would be. What are the types of things does he see a working agreement cover? So that we can understand a little bit more about what that conversation would be then. And then we decide, if we want to go that route or not, or if we feel like it'll be a rehashing. Because I think I totally understand where people are coming from, but I think the intent is really to switch to a different kind of a conversation. And I don't know what that would be. That's why I'd like to reach out to the attorney and get some more information for you, or like a full-fledged proposal on what this would look like. But I'm only going to do that if that's something that people are interested in. So I would like your thoughts on that.
I think it's worthwhile to reach out to our lawyer. I would hold back on a work session. I think the BOT has work sessions with the Planning Commission that are more of a need and a necessity for the overall town. So reaching out to the DDA attorney and having that discussion, bringing that back to the DDA board, I think would be an effective way. I understand, but I have not seen a formal request by the by the BOT to have a work session. And I do agree that the final investment policy was approved by the BOT at a meeting within the last couple of months.
Well, I also would like you to, if we're going to ask our attorney to do something, see if he's got some templates or agreements that he could share that he's done for other communities that give us an idea of what's contained in basically what sounds to me like an intergovernmental agreement, an IGA.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm imagining it as well.
And he may very well be able to provide you with some of those. I agree with Jonathan. I think that's where we should go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, This is Steve Carell. I'd just like to add that I would definitely be in favor of the DDA and the BOT getting together to try to come to an agreement about, what level of oversight is good for both boards, and all types of agreements, so that we don't have to keep kind of battling against each other for what each board wants to do with the other. So I think it would be a great thing. I'm really in favor of it.
Great, thanks, Steve. I am also in favor of that. I think that it would be, it would cut out a lot of the back and forth that we're having and a lot of the questions that are coming later. So I am still in favor of a work session and coming up with some kind of a working agreement. Let's go around the circle real quick. Steve Carreau has already spoken. Danielle, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions, no comments.
Okay. Ron has already, Jonathan has already. Andrew Dewart?
No, just that I believe, we this has been addressed, as Jonathan mentioned, with an investment policy that was approved by the board. And that's all.
Thank you. And Steve Roundtree?
No questions, no comments.
Okay. Is there any public comment? And hearing none, this was just a discussion item, so we don't have to take a vote on it. I guess Kate, do we bring it back next month, or do we ask the BOT what they think at their meeting and whether or not they'd want to schedule that type of work session?
So I think the first step that I heard was me reaching out to Paul Benedetti and seeing if I can get my hands on a draft IGA of his, or one that's been done. There may even be something online I can find from like the city of Golden or something. I'll look up that stuff, but it's more about getting a proposal for him on what the conversation items would be, the cost, so that we knew what we were getting into. So yes, I would bring that back for our next meeting. And I think I would just kind of keep in contact with Miranda. Miranda, do you have thoughts on how to move this forward?
Well, I'd like to talk to Mayor Larson about it on Monday. And then I think from there, we can try to schedule something. I'm not sure we necessarily need to go before the full BOT, because if it's a joint work session, obviously the members who are interested would then be in attendance. It's not necessarily a requirement.
Great.
For them all to be present.
Great.
Great. Then if that wraps that up, we can move forward. If Ron wants to move forward with future project proposals, or we can table that for the next meeting.
I'm sorry, didn't understand that.
So Ron, go, sorry, go ahead.
We can bring forward the last discussion item this evening, or we can table that for the next meeting. That is your call. It's the last one on the agenda.
Which one is it? I can't see it.
Future projects.
Oh, future projects. I'll be very brief. The statute addresses blight in several sections. Two of the best examples of blight in our community are the house on the RTD lot.
Historical Society.
I think we should approach the Historic Society and try to do something with that as a long-term project. Not this year, not next year, but put it in our long-term goals and plans. And then also the Snyder's Garage. We can, as a DDA, turn that into a very successful renovation project. Those are big items, those are big tickets, and I'll try and get to each one of you individually to talk about it. but I did want to have it on the discussion item thing because at some point I very much would like to see those two things incorporated into some of our projects. That's just enough for now. I'm sorry it's so late. Thank you very much for allowing me to bring it forward.
Yeah. Can I just motion to table this discussion item until next meeting, till we can have a slightly longer discussion about the ideas behind this and what the DDA as a board would see as benefits of both of these projects. I thank you, Ron, for bringing it forward and putting it kind of in the back of our mind, but I think it's worthwhile to have a discussion. So I would just motion to table this for a future meeting.
That's it.
How about the next meeting?
Works for me. Motion to table to next month's DDA meeting.
As a discussion item.
As a discussion item, correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Second that? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those
Aye.
opposed? All right. I would entertain a motion to dismiss.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, everyone, for hanging in so long tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Good night.
Good night.